and Hagmann report for today. It's a Manic Monday edition. It is the 18th day of August 2014. That's 8/18/2014. This is a live broadcast, and if anyone is curious, this is episode number 674. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host with my son Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of incredible programming tonight. Tonight we've got just a fantastic program for you planned. Two very special, very important people, Mr. Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com, and, of course, V, the Guerrilla Economist. RogueMoney.net is his website. Both linked to HagmanandHagmann.com. That's HagmanandHagmann.com. That's right. I didn't say HomelandSecurityUS.com, did I? Well, that's because we are moving our home base, our flagship station, to HagmanandHagmann.com. We are populating that. Of course, you can from there you can listen live. You can subscribe to our RSS feed. You can grab a hold of our SoundCloud subscription, iTunes, everything you need right from that one location, and of course listen live from there. Folks, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, our home base is being moved to HagmanandHagmann.com. We're also simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network there. You can tune us in at the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com. I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for deliberately listening to us. Thank you for placing your belief in us, your trust in us. This is something we don't want to squander. This is something we realize it's our responsibility as journalists, as investigators, and most importantly, as men of faith, men of God. And I just want to tell you how much we appreciate and value your listenership. I want to thank you for everyone listening all across the world. I want to thank you for joining us, Joe. Welcome, of course, and it's great to have you in studio, and we're going to off and running on a Monday.
Yeah, I'm excited for tonight, and we have a great week lined up this week. Just real quick, we'll have Steve and V are on tonight. Tomorrow, Stan Dale will be joining us in the second hour Wednesday. Greg Jackson, author of 40 Things to Tell Your Children Before You Die, will be joining us Wednesday. Thursday, Paul McGuire will be on, and Friday, Timothy Alberino. So it's going to be a fantastic week. And with that, we have Steve with us. I'm going to bring him on now. Steve, hello and welcome to Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Well, tonight's going to be an amazing night. Thank you so much, Joe and Doug, and V's on with us. One of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is how did we get where we're at, and do people really grasp the brevity or the lateness of the hour? I still see Joe and Doug and obviously V. We see some of the most amazing caricatures of stupidity played out by the mainstream press. And, basically tonight, who has done this thing? Who has brought this country effectively to the point of where we've got the military in the streets of Missouri? We've got the Chinese basically giving us ultimatums. We've got the Russians in country. We've got our borders being flooded. We've got Ebola being released. And I just want to share with people something that they don't understand. You can track all this stuff back to basically presidential decrees, even going back as far as Bill Clinton, when he gave the entire patent database on magnetic tape to the Chinese for free. And this is going to be important tonight as we talk about this. The bottom line is over the years, it has been the international banking elite's desire, now that they pretty much pillaged and plundered the middle class in America, to build up another middle class, both in China and in India, representing pretty much a third of the world's population. Nothing's better than 100 million people or even 50 million people paying interest to the international elite. Billion is even better. So when Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil, if you follow the money, you follow basically the true root of evil. And as I've maintained over the years doing shows with you, Doug, that most people just focus on the fruit of evil. And putting this into perspective, when Bill Clinton with Loral Satellite Corporation and others gave dual use, purpose, technology to the Chinese. They basically grabbed every bit of Western technology they have. That's why 4-star generals and above have told me they got everything, meaning China has everything. The point is that the Chinese white papers have gone into great detail on how they see the United States, but the tragedy in all this is simply this, that in a kingdom of lies, telling the truth causes the powers to be unfettered access and their power to destroy. That's an SQ statement. We live in a kingdom of lies. We live in a virtual world where everyone's attention is on something else. And tonight, V and I are going to talk about the great disparity between weapon systems of the West and the absolute insanity of destroying our military before our very eyes. The point is that we saw the news today that 8,000 Navy personnel are going to have to basically justify their existence. I'll boil that down to everybody. They'll either have to swear allegiance to the current regime in the slaughterhouse or they'll be out. And for the record, I will no longer, and if you hear me say it, Doug or Joe, correct me on the spot, I will no longer refer to the capital of the United States as what it goes by. It has become a slaughterhouse. It's dripping in blood. And for the record, given the fact that every man, woman, and child is now in harm's way in the United States of America, we built the military-industrial complex with our taxes, and now that's turned against us. So I'm going to turn it over to V. What a lot of people don't know about V is in one of his roles with the banks that he was basically an analyst for, he was tasked with checking out different weapon systems. And that used to be a fair reading of mine. I used to read Jane's Defense Weekly and all the Jane's publications for excitement. For those of you that don't know about it, you can look up Jane's Defense Weekly. Basically, who's got what weapons, and you know what? It's always a higher form of killing. And so with that, I'm going to bring on V. V, thanks for coming on. I think we need to tell people what is really going on, because it isn't suicide by stupidity. It's nation-side by design. Go ahead, sir. Is V there, Doug?
Steve, you know what? We're not showing V anywhere. I thought he was on conference perhaps with you.
No.
Stand by here. Okay. Hold on 1 second here. Hold on. We're looking for him here as we speak. Well, while we're doing this, Steve, I've just got to say this: we can trace this all the way back to Nixon, as well, when when him and Kissinger,
Kissinger, the China window, but behind the scenes it was George Bush's father, Prescott, that opened that door up, along with Kissinger, who has always been kind of the right-hand man. I think that, tell me when V comes on, you know, Doug, one of the biggest stories in the history of the United States was the one that a lot of us were breaking back in November 8th or 9th of 2010, and that's the infamous Chinese missile that was fired off the coast of California. Within hours, I received phone calls and emails from people that literally had their yachts basically on the western side of Catalina and the Channel Islands, saying they watched the missile come out of the water. I had contact immediate with missile launch commanders, both active and retired, that had said it was definitely a Chinese missile. One guy explained that by the color of the plume, a single nozzle plume, you could tell which country was using what by basically the solid fuel propellant. This was a JL-2 intercontinental ballistic missile, and what China did was basically send a message to the United States: you didn't even see us here, 30 miles off your coast. We can take you anytime we want. Now, immediately, NORAD and all the liars that be went into full-scale cover-up, and it was under Obama's orders to not tell the truth. I got emails from people that claimed they were Learjet pilots and it was a Learjet. I can tell you this, I've been in just about every model of a Learjet at some point in my life, and taking off at the maximum angle of takeoff, because I used to like to do that in my crazy days. And the deal is that there's no Learjet that stands perpendicular to the horizon with a single nozzle. Most people don't realize it, but Learjets have twin engines. So every form of disinformation, that was a story that everyone sought to cover up as quickly as possible. So if people want to go and look at that, what China basically said is this: all your systems have failed. You failed to see us. We can launch on you at any time. And believe it or not, Doug, everything that has happened to the United States has happened by design. Because when Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil, not money, but the love of it, when you follow foreign defense policy, when you follow any of these things, everybody has basically got a price. And that price is basically now the lives of 200 million Americans. I saw a really dumb posting. Somebody sent it to me. Somebody said, well, I don't know where these guys, I think he was referring to me, get the fact that the globalists want to kill 9/10 of the world's population. Well, all you got to do is do a search on whatever search engine you prefer and look at the population control statements from everybody from the United Nations to defense analysts and for this one, everyone needs to go to the Georgia Guidestone. So tonight what we're trying to do is build the case for the fact that what you see happening, what we see happening around the country, especially with the instigation of trying to stir up racial strife, is by design. The whole country is coming apart at the seams. You know, Michael Savage says borders, language, culture. Well, you can obviously understand over the past couple decades that's been continually hacked and attacked. But now we're at a point where the defense posture of the United States has been so compromised that you every day you hear of some new form of surrender, whether it's 8,000 Navy, I forget the name of the officers, first officers or whatever, then the Air Force, 250 flag officers and generals fired. And you know why they were fired? Because they wouldn't swear allegiance to the president versus swearing allegiance to the Constitution. That ought to tell everybody something. So the question is, when did the American public become the enemy with all the external enemies? And I'll answer that real quick. Is V on yet?
No, sir. He's missing in action. And
why don't you guys have his number, right?
It's we cannot. It's ringing a fast busy, Steve. When we try to call him, I'm not sure if it's our trunk lines here or what's going on.
Here, let me do this too. And look, ladies and gentlemen, I expected something to happen, and I just had just a reason, and I'm obviously willing and able to do the show, but I really want him on because he's got some data. I'm going to basically, Doug, talk for a minute. I'm going to send him an email, and the thing is, I'm going to try and find out what's going on. Okay?
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll take it. And folks, yeah, I'll tell you what, live radio, it is kind of an interesting venue when stuff like this happens. Steve and I were talking earlier today about this very topic, and the red tide, the communist Chinese targeting of America. Folks, I got to tell you something. If you remember way back when Napoleon Bonaparte, of course you wouldn't remember this, you would read about this, when China awakens, the world will tremble. And we have to take a look at what's taking place. The fact that right now, and I had written up a kind of a little bit of a show promo on Hagmann and Hagmann.com. And when you look at this, when you look at what's going on, when you look at the technological surrender of the United States to Communist China, the deliberate destruction of the U.S. military from within, you see a trail of betrayal, sedition, greed, and the globalist agenda's fingerprints of the globalists all over the last few decades. And we have been fully collateralized, and as I point out, sold out to the Chinese, and by its very nature to the Russians as well. And I was reading a little bit from Dave Hodges' website. Remember, of course, the Bundy Ranch standoff, and it feels like ancient history. And people are perhaps thinking, well, it's no longer an issue. Of course it is still an issue. Harry Reid and others will make it an issue. And from Hagmann and Hagmann.com, there are some very important links in that article, that show promo. Dave Hodges points out, for example, in the communist Chinese takeover of all U.S. energy, what the Bundy Ranch standoff was really all about. the Bundy affair affirmed that the Chinese are being handed control of, in that case, and in many cases, solar energy inside the U.S. for what solar energy is. And we have to realize the shall I say, really the inefficiency of solar energy. But the whole Bundy affair, who was behind it? Senator Harry Reid, of course. The takeover of American energy is being manifested, though, on many fronts. It's being concentrated on the takeover of the solar industry right now in the new Agenda 1 designation with the so-called solar energy zones. Now, these zones are starting to pop up in a lot of locations all across Arizona, California. Yep.
California, Jerry Brown, I don't know if it was an executive action, but it was a 33% move to renewable energies or solar energies by 2020. And I actually saw an article today where the implementation of some of these solar energies are zapping birds midair with the reflectors of their sunlight. It's so hot, it's called concentrated sun rays. It's zapping these birds midair.
Wow,
yeah,
I didn't see that.
I mean, there was articles last week also on Nancy Pelosi and the benefits that her family's been getting from these companies, and that goes back to Solyndra and other failed energy companies now.
Well, you know, the names are incredible. The people in power behind this, it reads like a who's who list. And Joe Farah from WorldNet Daily had written an article on the 13th of April titled Harry Reid's Last Roundup. Well, it's just not Harry Reid behind this. It's others. And it's all across, it's all across the political spectrum. So, you know.
Hey, Doug?
Yes, sir.
Doug, I mean,
yes.
I think I got a hold of him. He should be calling in a minute. But the point being is it's everyone in the Senate and Congress. That's why there's no difference between the prostitutes that work the right side of the street and the prostitutes that work the left side of the street. And they're meanwhile proclaiming their virtue, and they would make the horrors of history seem chaste, okay? And the thing is that, again, here's the thing. We're at a point now where our defense systems are pretty much down, being taken apart. When the current administration made the statement they want their own military, they've got it with the DHS. When you've seen the militarization of the police force, and then with a caveat, I didn't know this until today, but all of the items that are being given by the Defense Department have to be proven to be in use in theater within the United States within 12 months. Did you know that?
Didn't realize that, sir. No.
No, I didn't either.
So, from when, though? From when, Steve? Are we talking in the next 12 months, or are we talking by the end of the year?
No, we're talking about it from the 12 months that they started getting it, and they started amping and ramping up about, 3 months ago. So that ought to put everybody in a time frame. So, it's getting very, very dicey. Now, look, I'm not stalling for time, but I want. Is V on yet?
We're good to go, sir.
Okay, and he can listen to me right now, right?
Yes, he can.
Yes, I can hear you, Steve.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, V, before you came on, I was just setting it up for you. I want you to share about the advanced weapon systems, and I gave everybody a little insight into your background as an analyst. You had to see who had what that worked effectively. I laid the case, since you probably didn't hear it, that all of our top technology was transferred to the Chinese under, how should I say this, treasonous and questionable, all for the mighty dollar. And I just made the statement that all of our leadership in the Congress and Senate, it appears they've all sold out. So go ahead and take it from there and explain to the people just how now the United States is at the mercy of the belligerents out there to do whatever they want.
Absolutely. A lot of people find it to be very surprising when they hear that a lot of our military tech has either been given to the Chinese in terms of a patent, via having them steal it, or just handed over in general, blueprints, all sorts of technology. look at, for instance, and, this is something we've done in the past, and I'll get to that, but, look at, for instance, the F-35 program, okay? Here's a plane that's supposed to be the one aircraft, the jack of all trades, that's supposed to be replacing 3 aircraft within the United States Air Force. This plane is supposed to replace the A-10 Warthog as a close-in air to ground support. It's supposed to replace the F-18 Hornet for the Navy and the Marines, and it's supposed to replace the F-16, for the Air Force. Something like a project like the F-35, something that's this important, you would think that they would hold the data and the information and the blueprints and the technology and the research and the development of this weapon system, that they would be very, very careful to make sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. And it was only a matter of a few years into the actual contract being awarded to Lockheed that their computer systems was breached. It was breached, and a lot of the technology was stolen, and it was stolen by the Chinese. And it was actually put out there by the media that Lockheed might have been hacked by Chinese hackers, and a lot of the F-35 blueprints have been stolen and taken. Now, this is significant because most, advanced projects, especially the military sense, if it's, very important in the past, they were all done by computers that are not networked into the wider internet, so to speak. Okay, these were all off the grid, off network, within, contained intranets. So this is not something that's going to be, easily, something that somebody would hack into and steal. That was not the case with the F-35. And that has not been the case with a few other weapon systems, some of the missile technology that we have as well. So fast forward, and what happened? Well, in 2013, and we've seen this in 2012, but in 2013, the Chinese, while we're having all sorts of developmental problems with the F-35, it really isn't a be-all, end-all. It actually is a flying lemon, so to speak. It's a terrible plane. You fast forward to about a year or so ago, and you see the Chinese release their version of the F-35, and I believe they call it the F-30, the Golden Eagle, okay? The F-30 looked like a twin-engined F-35 with some very strong design cues of an F-22 thrown in there. Now, this is unbelievable. It's unprecedented. But it should not come up as a surprise because this is exactly what we did when the Soviet Union collapsed. And there has been, ever since the end of World War II, a massive amount of technology transfer. Okay, I mean, look at the similarities, and I think Anthony C. Sutton, who is a former scholar over at the Heritage, the Hoover Institute, excuse me, Anthony C. Sutton wrote a wonderful book. I think the book is called Western Technology and Soviet Expansionism. And that book detailed, part by part, serial number by serial number, the very engine technology being transferred, the very propulsion systems, the very radar systems, right over to the Soviet Union to build them up so they can be the enemy, the best enemy possible that the money can buy. And it became the absolute best enemy that was required for the next 50-some-odd years during the Cold War. So it was very, very interesting to see this. Now, these guys who've built up the Soviet Union, who've transferred a lot of the technology to the Soviets, are doing the same thing with the Chinese. A lot of their sub-launched nuclear ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, were actually built using U.S. designs. A lot of the Chinese, their cruise missile ships, a lot of it is a bite-off and re-engineering of the Aegis cruisers that we have with the Aegis radar system, which still is a very effective radar system. It's a phased array. It's not it's no longer a ship looking for with a radar dome that spins on top, but it's a phased array, meaning has radar on the sides on these large surface areas on the ship that are able to give out bursts to create an absolute umbrella of protection for the fleet. The Chinese copy that. Look what the Chinese are doing. They've purchased an old Russian aircraft carrier. They've revamped it, rebuilt it, and they're putting it out to sea on sea trials. Their carrier crews are being trained very similar to the U.S. crews. Now, even though this, the Russian carrier, the Chinese carrier, the Yingling, is very similar to the Admiral Kunitsikov carrier that the Russians have, the difference being is they have put much more reliable engines in there. They've put much more reliable electronics in there, so it's not prone to the reliability and the breakdown problems that the Russians once had. And their crews are being trained exactly like U.S. crews. So these things are happening, folks, because China is being built up as a massive counterweight for the U.S. So most of our politicians, who, again, are short-term thinking people, as soon as they get into the office, what they're looking to do is, I want to make as much money as I can, I want to cut as much deals as I can, and I want to get out. That's what they want to do. And if they can continue making money for the first 4 years, or the next 40 years, as long as they can hold on to office and make money, that's their number one thing. It's not about what's good for the country. It's not about what's good for the people. It's about what's good for me. What's in it for me? That's their whole entire paradigm. So when you see people that are not patriotic, that don't really give a rat's rear end about their country, it becomes very easy to bribe them, and that's what the Chinese have done. The Chinese have done masterfully in giving a great deal of money to the Clintons, okay, during the whole Clinton administration, where all of a sudden there's missing paperwork from Los Alamos, and there's nuclear secrets that have gone missing, and this, that, and the other, where, you've seen that the 90s, okay, folks, the 90s was a time of all of a sudden missing secrets and lost technology, this, that, and the other, and all of a sudden we go into 2000, and next, out of nowhere, the Chinese, who had at the end, and I remember this, folks, in 1999, when the Brits handed over Hong Kong, the Chinese military moved on there. They had a military parade, and when you look at their equipment, it was equipment from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. At that time, they called the Chinese military an army in sneakers. In other words, it was a joke. Their army wasn't worth anything. It was one of the largest militaries in the world per capita, but in terms of any sort of technological progression or prowess, it wasn't there to be seen. They didn't have much of a navy. There was no submarine fleet, really. The submarine fleets that they had were very old, very ancient. It just was very – they didn't have a blue water navy that they can project their power to. So this was the situation with China. And then out of nowhere, you see this incredible burst of innovation and growth and technology. And you see this rapid revamping and modernization of their military. Now, they have stealth aircraft. They have stealth ships. They have global reach capability. They have missile technologies that have greatly progressed. They have satellite technology. They're leading the world in microchip processing. And folks, right now the fastest supercomputer that we know of, okay, is now in the hands of the Chinese. They've made it. So you see this burst of growth. It's unbelievable. You have a country for 50 years, technologically and infrastructure-wise and militarily, it's been stagnant. And then all of a sudden you see that towards the turn of the century, a massive explosion, rate of growth, the likes of which no one has ever seen. And that can only be done if they were given something. You don't advance a program that would typically take a nation 25 years to achieve. You don't achieve it in 5 years unless somebody gives you something. You see what I'm saying? So that's the thing about the Chinese that most people don't realize. So who gave them this? Well, it's our dirty, rotten politicians, number one, and our defense contractors, number two. You have moles that are in the defense contractors and these defense companies that are selling secrets, not only to the Chinese, but they also sell to the Israelis, which we've heard with the whole Patriot missile thing. They also sell to they sell out the technology to the Russians, and vice versa. So there's no honor among thieves, folks. So the whole detriment to this whole entire thing is that it puts us at a very, very vulnerable position. And that's the thing, I guess, later on in the program, I'll kind of detail for the audience why it puts us in a very dangerous predicament. And we're going to try and work on deconstructing some of this mythos about the U.S. military, this whole perceived notion that we're this incredible supreme force that has the most incredible technology the world's ever seen, this, that, and the other. So we're going to kind of get into that. Steve.
And Steve, it's interesting, by the way, and V, it's interesting that the Clinton administration gave a lot to China. And don't forget when NATO, I should say, accidentally bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade back in, there was a NATO raid back, I think, when was that, 1999, perhaps, late 1998, sometime in that. But shortly thereafter, of course, the Chinese were given technology to launch a satellite. And, of course, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence gave their backing for this transfer of technology. So this is all seditious across party lines. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, one of the things that most people don't realize is China's anti-satellite or ASAT weaponry is so advanced because guess what? As V said, they stole it from us. But let's fast forward a little bit into April, and we're going to go back and forth between Russia and China. 2014, the Black Sea, the Donald Cook, the missile cruiser, state-of-the-art Aegis system, everything. This was, if you will, the cat's meow for the U.S. Navy. For 90 minutes, an Su-24, a Sukhoi Su-24 Fencer fighter overflew the Donald Cook, 90 minutes, Doug, and basically took out all of its steering, all of its fire control systems. In essence, the Russians' electronic assault on the Donald Cook rendered the state-of-the-art U.S. military command, control, and communication on that ship and sent a message to the entire Navy. When I don't remember, V, if you and I were on that night or shortly thereafter, we did a show on it. But that very night, I was getting emails from, quote, the back rooms and the backwoods of people saying, man, they are absolute, I won't say what the actual language because it's pretty rough, but they were saying that the Pentagon was in a panic. Now, to put this into perspective, the military should have controlled the technology, and we even have, and part of the problem with the F-35 is that we allowed, this is interesting, we allowed Chinese parts to go into our state-of-the-line fighters, and the same thing goes with our state-of-the-line military. So here's what I'm trying to say, Doug. It's like the Trojan horse, the whole story of the Trojan horse. We have a Trojan Congress. We have a Trojan Senate. We have a entity in the White House that is absolutely bent on destroying this country. I quote him in context. America is the greatest country in the world, and we intend to change that. Remember that, you guys? So It doesn't just go with him. It goes all the way back to Nixon. But here's the point. The Chinese were granted, under Bill Clinton, they were granted everything. If the crown jewels of the Defense Department, here's the irony, our leading defense contractors were salivating at earning the profits, but China had a deal. You had to build some of the parts in country in order for them to buy whatever they're going to buy. It's called dual-use technology. And as everybody piled on and piled it higher and deeper, in essence, we were like, how do I say this? We were going to be given Golden Globes at the International Vampires Convention, and the whole idea was to see who had the most blood by getting everybody to slit their wrists. How's that for a metaphor? And as everybody was bleeding out, going, I hope I win the Globe, there were voices in the country saying, don't you realize you're bleeding to death? And that's what you're hearing from tonight, only it's no longer, in my opinion, I'll let V speak for himself, but I think he agrees, it's no longer that we've been bled to death in the Defense Department and in the entire area of technology. We have bled out. Bled out means when there's nothing more to bleed out. And I got to tell you something. When I do a show like this, V does a show like this, we both get contacts. V's a general source that he spent hours with, I mean, these are real people, yet I can't say that, yet the frozen stone people, that's another word for something, basically can't wait to get on the Yelp or the gossip forums and say, well, these guys are crazy. We're not crazy. We know what we're talking about. And again, Doug, the thing is that there's no way to explain the what I call technocide, TECHNO side, that has gone on in the United States government outside of bribery and outside of just simply buying them off. And what's easier? We used to, $1 million used to be a lot of money. Then it has to be $1 billion. But look, when you're printing money and you're sitting with $2 trillion, you can buy a lot of allegiance and loyalty, because the guys who are selling out the country don't even understand that they're selling it out for peanuts or for inflated dollars. And the joke is whoever's bribing them to commit acts of treason, they're getting worthless paper. V?
Yeah, absolutely, folks. I mean, here's an article that I just pulled up, and this is from the United States Naval Intelligence News, okay? And the report is dated May 28th of 2013. And, it's about a little over a year old, but here's the title. China hacked 24 U.S. weapon system designs. 24. Now, these are the 24 that we know. There's about 24. Think about it. 24 different weapon systems designs. And it says Chinese hackers have obtained designs for more than 24 U.S. weapon systems, including the Aegis ballistic missile defense system that we just talked about, the F-35 Lightning, that we just talked about, the LCS, that's the new advanced stealth ship that we have, it's called the Littoral Combat Ship, and you're going to love this one, Steve. They also stole the secrets for our electromagnetic railguns.
Nothing surprises me.
Yeah. According to a Monday report from the Washington Post, the detailed list was part of a classified version of the January report from the Pentagon's Defense Science Board on U.S. cyber posture. The Post obtained the full version of the report, and it goes on to say that China utilizes intelligence services and employed other illicit approaches that involve violations of U.S. law and export controls to obtain key national security technologies, controlled equipment, and other materials not readily obtainable through commercial means or academia. And then, folks, here's an example here. In 2007, the theft of terabytes of data on the F-35 program is often blamed on the speed in which China was able to develop its own stealth fighters. The Chinese government has long denied it employs hackers to steal U.S. secrets. And the whole point is, folks, is they're basically telling you that these idiots have put over 24 of the best weapon system designs that we have, including the crown jewel of the entire Navy, which is the electromagnetic railgun. And they put them on networked computers. When you put something on a network computer, folks, the Chinese did not steal this. This was practically given away at that point. And that's the thing that you got to understand. This is unbelievable. It's also unbelievable in the sense that when you look at technology like the LCS, the Littoral Combat Ship, and if you have an opportunity to Google it, Google it. Now, granted, this is a ship that's frigate-sized, but the design is something that it can be stretched, it can be enlarged, and you can use that specific hull design and its low radar signature to create much larger, much more capable vessels. I mean, this is unbelievable, folks. It's totally unbelievable. The saddest part is, okay, and as I say, when you put these on a network, okay, you're practically giving them away. You don't put secrets, you don't put designs and research and development of these types of systems in wide open computer networks. No, you put them in physically isolated areas. Okay, and it's unbelievable. So it's almost as if, and it's not almost as if, it is, our kleptocracy, which has become so endemic, gave away strategic classified information, and it's no big deal to them. It's absolutely no big deal to them. And that is a worrying sign that we are a nation that's in decline, folks. It's unbelievable.
And that was under the Bush administration, that theft, by the way, the 2007 theft of terabytes of data. You know, people have a tendency, and we just have to really remind people, of course, this transcends partisan politics, folks. By the way, Steve has done a fantastic job of documenting all of the information we're talking about tonight on stevequayle.com and, of course, roguemoney.net, folks. Go to roguemoney.net for the latest as well. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, one of the tragedies, and this is something I believe is going to be used against the United States because, again, I posted on my website, I think V and I did a show together, or I did one, and forgive me, so many shows, but on the white papers of Chinese. Years ago, I became friends with the inventor of the neutron bomb, the actual guy, Sam Cohen. I interviewed him numerous times on, I think, the Blueprint for Survival days, and how I wish I still had those, those tapes of those shows. And by the way, if Steve Melching's listening to this or anybody knows him, would you ask him to send me an email, because I'd like to get those shows, and obviously I'm willing to pay him for those shows. The point is that the neutron bomb works differently than any other nuclear device in that it basically keeps everything intact, Doug and Joe, and V obviously knows this, but that was given to the Chinese by George Bush Sr. as China was opening up. Someone says, well, you can't prove that. I proved it when I had the guy that invented it on the radio with me, and he said that on the air. Hawk just sent me an email. He remembers it. By the way, Hawk remembers more of my shows than I do. God bless you, Hawk. He really does. Sometimes I skip a few things by a few years, but he doesn't. So here's the thing. The neutron bomb can be used, and it doesn't have the fireball. It doesn't have the sheer explosive force that knocks down buildings, but it kills everything within its design radius that's living by basically just flooding a neutron wave over the people. When people were BSing and trying to describe or deny red mercury, I had him on. He was saying, of course the stuff exists. Now, it's not the stuff that people are trying to sell on eBay. It's called mercury antimony oxide. There's a book called Red Mercury written, and I forget who the authors are. But the point is that the neutron weapon is what will be used against the United States. Imagine this, Doug. Take any capital of the United States, let's say 100K. Imagine strategically pre-positioned neutron bombs. They don't have to be delivered on a missile or rocket. They can be trucked in. They can be shipping containered in. And then imagine this. At a certain point, a button's pressed and every living thing is dead, but all the buildings are left standing. All of the infrastructure, when I say infrastructure, all of the stores, all the merchandise, everything is okay. It's just there's no people. It's probably the ultimate weapon. And I think if Hawk remembers this, and I do remember this, Sam Cohen said he wept because it was the edge that the United States could use, and it was given away, and it was given away by a former president. So from George Bush Sr. forward, all of our leading technology, neutron bomb is a sophisticated weapon. It was, if you will, the ultimate arrow in our quiver. But beyond that, I would say the black physics weapons of ancient history, electrogravitics and all the stuff. And by the way, people, they just announced, I think last week, that harmonic levitation, there's an app now, I think, for an iPhone that you can levitate balls, actually lift weight. You can transcend gravity, which, as W said, is a pressure, by basically a new form of sound. It's called sonic or harmonic levitation. So see, Doug, here's the thing. It's almost like V and I are chronicling, looking back through history, the betrayal and the destruction. Now, what's in it for us? What's in it for us is that if we tell people what's going on, they can pray. They can begin, and I'm serious about praying. I believe that the 27th Psalm that I posted up today is probably the most important psalm that a person can read now next to Psalm 91 and start to memorize it. So, ladies and gentlemen, the brethren worldwide, please start memorizing Psalm 27. You know, King David said, "Your word, O Lord, have I hid in my heart that I might not trespass against thee." And as someone who is guilty of many trespasses against the Lord, I'm trying to basically say, Lord, help me to focus on your victory and on your perspective, not what I see. Because, listen, you can use a word in front of storm, whatever you want to use. You can use whatever hits the fan. But I'm telling you this, it's a liquid goop falling down. And again, I got an email from some guy. God bless him. He meant good. But he said, you need to tell people, Steve, because of your radio presence that, you know, if we only do this and we only do that, we can turn it around. No, you can't. Our nation is turned unto judgment. So talking about the weapon systems now, we're talking about state-of-the-art. Every aircraft carrier is toast due to the Russian Squall missiles, some of the hypersonics. And by the way, Hawk and I, 15 years ago, maybe longer, we're talking about hypercavitation of torpedoes. That means, Doug, instead of, you know, the old World War II vintage torpedoes or Korean, we've got things that can travel so fast underwater because by hypercavitation they create an airspace and the torpedo works through that airspace. We're talking about stuff too. There's two levels of this whole warfare thing. There's the stuff that V and I are talking about that's pretty well known, and James writes about it, and V basically had to rate it and check it out to see if it was what it was. But then there's the whole thing too in the world of black physics and ancient warfare, and that's when people get really nervous. They can't even believe us, V. We're talking about the normal stuff like missile frigates being completely shut down and the ship having been hauled into port, and literally that's sending a message. And, Doug, again, I want to make this clear. What that said is that the entire Navy was basically a U.S. Navy, our top-of-the-line stuff was rendered inoperable instantly. And for 90 minutes, if you think about that, 90 minutes, it was the ultimate mocking of the United States' high technology. Go ahead, B.
Absolutely, folks. I mean, you know, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scene. Okay, you know, we're kind of detailing for you guys the entire military gutting that's been going on. Okay, we're no longer a defense industry that's, you know, looking at real results. Okay, they're not buying the results anymore. They're buying marketing. Okay, you can see this with the F-35 and the absolute waste that it is in terms of it being an absolute money pit in which taxpayer dollars are just vacuumed away into Lockheed. It's an absolute disaster. So that, I believe, is totally what the whole idea of the F-35 is. It is designed to be a money pit. It's designed to never really fly, fight, or do any of those things well, but just to be a proverbial money pit into which a desperate company is causing American taxpayers to throw their money at. You look at the fact that this is occurring. You look at the fact that, you know, you have the other useless weapon systems like the Stryker. And folks, you look at all of these things and you add them together, it's absolutely undermining us as a military force. Our opponents, our competitors, you know, our enemies have counters to the very systems that we have. They have a counter to it. Okay, the stealth aircraft are not something that's completely invisible to radar. That's a myth. But this is something that most Americans believe. Americans believe that stealth somehow renders a plane invisible on radar and you can't see it. It's not true. I can track every single F-35 plane out there, and this is a fact, using the very same radars that they used during the Battle of Britain back in 1943. Okay? The same long wavelength radars are able to detect stealth aircraft. The newer ASA radars are able to detect stealth aircraft. There's nothing that can be invisible from radar. That defies the very laws of science and physics. Okay, so you can diminish some of your radar cross-section so it doesn't reflect as much, but that's about it. But to render it invisible, that's more marketing than reality, okay? So when you put the things that we have against of what our opponents have, you see that we're at a disadvantage. Case in point, back in 2008, we had an exercise, and the United States had an exercise with the Air Force, and it was the United States Air Force versus the Indian Air Force. It was called COPE India 2008. At that time, the Indians flew their best plane, which is the Su-30. They've recently upgraded to the Su-33 MKI, which is a very advanced aircraft. It's a Russian airframe, but using Indian, Israeli, and French avionics. It is a very nasty plane. It's an incredible dogfighter. Probably, it's arguably one of the most capable, if not the most capable, fighter that's fielded today. So we took our F-15s and our F-16s, and we, flogged them against the Indians. The Indians had a kill ratio of 8 to 1. That's incredible. That means for every Indian aircraft that the Americans shot down, the Indians took down 8 Americans. It's unprecedented, okay? So there goes some of the disadvantages that we have. Look at what we're flying today, folks. The majority of what's made up in our Air Force are designs from the 70s, the F-15, the F-16, okay, and the early 80s, like the F-18. These are considered what's called fourth-generation aircraft. We're not fielding anything new. We're not fielding the latest fifth-gen. The only fifth-gen aircraft that we have in service is the F-22. And that thing, you can't fly it above 25,000 feet without its oxygen sensors failing, and it winds up choking out its pilots. You can't fly it in a lightning storm because it's not certified to fly in a lightning storm or a thunderstorm because it can render its sensitive radar skin inoperable. It can damage it. So, what is the point? This is ridiculous if you think about it. Nobody with common sense would sign off on a program like this. And it's, I don't blame Robert Gates for canceling the F-22. I really don't. It's not that great of a plane. The problem is, folks, we're spending money in places that we don't need. We're not developing weapon systems that are useful. We're developing mediocrity. We're developing mediocre weapon systems and mediocre programs, and we're just passing it off as first-class, world-class, and world-beating, or, look at the F-22. It's got these flaws. They're not calling it an air superiority fighter, which was the title given to the F-15, and rightfully so. The F-15, is a fantastic airframe. But they're calling it, it's got to be better than air superiority. We're going to call it air dominance. So you hear this myth built on the F-22. Oh, it's an air dominance fighter. As soon as the F-22 is in the air, nobody could see it, and it just mysteriously shoots all these planes out of the sky. It's garbage. And what is it shooting out of the sky with? What kind of missile is it using? It's using an AIM-120 AMRAAM. And for those that don't know, if you all remember Pastor Bruce, he worked at one point as an engineer with Raytheon to help develop the AIM-120 AMRAAM. And back in the 70s and 80s, especially the 80s, in the 90s, the AMRAAM was a great missile. Not anymore. It really isn't. It only has a 50, maybe a 30 to 40% kill ratio. So think about it. That's it. We only make 2 air-to-air missiles, the Sidewinder, the AIM-120 the AIM-9 Sidewinder, and the AIM-120 AMRAAM. That's it. The Russians have 5 different air-to-air missiles. So if an American, just put it to you this way. If you were an American fighter jock, and you're in a missile, you're shooting off your missiles, against your opponent, you only have 2 in your arsenal. You got the Sidewinder, the AIM-9, and the AIM-120. That's it. Both of which don't have 90 or 100% kill ratios. So you're hoping that the missiles you fire will be able to take out your opponent. But let's say your opponent is Russian, Chinese, or even Indian. They have 5 different types of air-to-air missiles. That means it's 5 different types of missiles that you have to develop countermeasures for. So if you are able to evade one or two, you're guaranteed to get hit by the third or the fourth. And that's how they developed. See, the Russians are very practical in developing their military. Look at their tanks. The T-90. It's almost half the weight of the M1 Abrams. It's a fast tank. It has a very nasty gun. It has some pretty impressive armor. Okay, granted, head-to-head, it might not, win against the Abrams, but it has the mobility, the firepower, and it can shoot missiles from its turret to take out tanks and or aircraft. That's innovative. So this is the type of stuff that we're not ready for, folks. Okay, and when we are in a desperate situation, it's going to put us in a bind. And then you want to talk about, after ruining the weapons system, Steve, what is the next thing that they ruin with the military? The military's morality. And Steve, I think you're the one who sent me the link about that Okinawa gay parade that they're doing on that military base.
Yep.
With the cross-dressers. So you have this absolute undermining of the military morally. You're putting women in combat. You get rid of don't ask, don't tell. Now homosexuality is something to be embraced and celebrated. Folks, these are things that weaken a fighting machine. These are things that weaken a military. These are things that our enemies look at and laugh. And this is what's happening. This is a poison. They've poisoned the pool. Okay? They've lowered the requirements, the physical requirements to get into the military. They've made these boot camps easier from what it was 10, 15 years ago. They're making it the requirements lower so that women can also pass an obstacle course. These things are going to absolutely annihilate us when the time comes. And this is something that no amount of liberal engineering, no amount of social engineering is ever going to fix, because the damage has already been done. Steve.
When you get into the realm, too, of transhumanism and the Borg and the merging of machines and the takeover of literally human will, human fighters, the thing that I love, and I'm saying this, I love about Russian weapon design is that it's always practical. They still have, the Russians still use old technology that basically is impervious to EMP. My concern with EMP is obviously with the weapons that can generate electromagnetic pulse guns, and the Russians do lead the world in Tesla physics. End of story. There's a lot of arguments, and people say, what about all our secret stuff? Well, for every measure, there's a countermeasure. And again, the fact is, V, is that we're at, how do I say this? I think we're at the crossroads with our own destruction. Here's a good example. This is something people need to understand about cyber warfare and cyber terrorism. You're hearing the Defense Department. I think the Cyber Terrorism Command spends more time on talk shows like mine and Hawks and others, and for the record, I do know, this is not bragging, but I do know what it's like to have more interference in shortwave broadcasts than anybody in the history of shortwave broadcasts. How about this? Chinese University, Red Chinese University, opened a branch office in Dayton, Ohio a number of years ago and was hired, you're going to love this, as a defense contractor by the DHS in an anti-cyber terrorism program. U.S. taxpayers paid them to infiltrate. You see, here's the thing, V. I believe, somebody once said, well, you're talking about all fifth column stuff. I said the numbers into the columns are astronomical. There is no place they have not infiltrated. And for the record, the scripture is true. The borrower becomes servant to the lender. And when we come back in the next part of the show, you said something, Doug, at the beginning of the show. I can tell you this, that every national park in the United States and every place else in this country is already given over to the Chinese as collateral for all their loans. See, they don't just give Yankee Devils money. They're always Yankee Devils have strings, and that's when you give something to someone with strings, they become your puppet. Go ahead, Doug.
All right, with that, we'll go to the top of the hour break. Folks, you're listening to Steve Quayle and V on this Monday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Today is Monday, August.
Welcome back, folks, to hour number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. On this, the 18th day of August, 2014, I'm Doug Hagmann. In studio with me is Joe Hagmann. On our newsmaker lines, we've got Mr. Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com, and V, the Guerrilla Economist, who, by the way, has got his own weekly radio show. Just go to roguemoney.net for information, roguemoney.net. By the way, a lot of great information on both sites, required reading, certainly our show prep every day. Welcome back, folks. V and Steve. Steve, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, I think that given the fact that everything in this country is indicative of a nation under siege, soon to face destruction, I think people had better just basically do some honest soul searching and look at everything in perspective. We've got a situation now that's being fomented in, obviously, Missouri. We've got a situation now that is pretty much escalating even beyond what happened in Los Angeles with Rodney King. We've got a situation now that basically has seen people from Oakland, instigators, Black Panthers coming in, others coming in to make this a bigger thing. Now, people have got to understand, part of the plan to overthrow the United States was to generate race riots. It is to basically cause the people in this country to be so focused on what's going internally that they fail to see what's going externally. Let me give you a good example. We can talk about weapon systems, but let's talk about the human weapon. Now we've got an Ebola situation that we have open borders. You can't tell me that closing the gate after the horses are out are going to keep the horses within the confines of the gate. When I posted the story on my website today showing what Vienna, Austria is doing, I want everybody to go and look at how Vienna is dealing with an Ebola or a potential Ebola infected person or carrier. When you're dealing with Ebola, it's a BSL, Biosafety Level 4. It is the most dangerous, or a group of very dangerous pathogens. Yet, instantly, Doug, and we've talked about this, to remind everyone, we should have had quarantine about a month or two ago, but we didn't. Then we heard silly statements that the British are tracking 30,000 people. They should have only had to track 3 people. The point being is a globalist, and here's again, maybe in a little while we'll get to the population control statements. One of them is really important to understand that, Claire Chambers basically said this: since its inception, the United Nations has advanced a worldwide program of population control, scientific human breeding, and Darwinism. And the point that is critical for people to understand is even Robert McNamara back in 1981 said there are many ways to make the death rate increase. What I'm trying to put into perspective, and V's trying to put into perspective, is the lateness of the hour. You can read about the Book of Revelation, and you can basically say, well, that isn't happening yet. Oh, yeah? Well, the Pacific Ocean now, it's coming out. Fukushima, we talked about it. There has been such a lying group of devils from hell, okay, I don't know how to make that into an acronym, that have kept every single fact of ionizing radiation basically put forth in literature and scientific literature and studies of exposure to ionizing radiation. They just set that aside. So how do you live in the kingdom of fools when someone comes on and says, you don't have to be foolish anymore? If you listen, here's the point. If you listen to mainstream media, if you tell me, well, I don't believe it because it's not on Fox, I don't believe it's because it's not on MSNBC or CBS or ABC, then you're already part of the Borg. Here's the bottom line. The contempt for humanity now is being played out for all to see. There's one that Jesus said comes only to kill, to rob, and to steal, and to destroy, and that's the devil, okay? There's a supernatural element to this. It's not just Russia. It's not just China, the United States, North Korea. It's not just the nations of the world, but it's the entities behind them. In the book of Daniel, the prince of Persia withstands Daniel's intercessory prayer, and Michael and Gabriel both have to fight him for what, 21 days? So the point is that there are unseen forces loose. and now it's given to the angel to take peace from the earth. I would dare anybody to tell me there's peace on the earth. Look at the Ukraine. Look what's going on around the world. Look at the slaughter of Christians. And still, the Christians in America think that somehow it's over there and not here. We have ISIS posting what they're, and by the way, ISIS is nothing more than a group of mercenaries that are funded by some of the world's top intelligence agencies, and not just the U.S. You see, ladies and gentlemen, there is a plan in this. It goes back to what Albert Pike talked about in the Third World War. Whether you believe that letter is real or not, I do, from Mazzini. They basically said they're going to turn the Mohammedans against the Christians and Jews. And once they kill everybody off, I'm paraphrasing, then the pure doctrine of Lucifer can come on the scene. Sounds like that's what they're doing, Doug, really quickly. And now it's even more pronounced because there are weapons that aren't high technology. There are weapons where you simply have to take people that are willing to die for their cause, infect them with some of the most dangerous pathogens, and release them. Every single communicable disease that seemed to have been in check is no longer in check and is out of control. Does anybody really take the Ebola quarantine seriously when you've got the border issues? And if you look, ladies and gentlemen, at where all of the people are being bused to, and all the immigrants without any health safety, and then you look at the areas of FEMA camps, etc., I think it's pretty obvious to see. I coined a term years ago, infectons. Those are people that are intentionally infected with the idea of, if you will, they're a viral suicide carrier, and a viral suicide carrier can go to a lot of dimensions. So we're talking not only about, missiles and boats and planes and all of the different rail guns and EMP weapons and the blinding lasers. Guess what? The Chinese were overwhelmingly clear that they possess lasers that can blind everybody on the battlefield. The U.S. has it too. So it's always a higher form of killing. But even at a more sinister level, look at how everyone in the United States is preoccupied with self. I think the selfie thing is probably the greatest, greatest expression of narcissism ever put into a technological base or ever seen on the planet at any time. Selfies. Who started it or watched the selfies take place? People are basically struggling for identity, and they want people to know that, hey, I count. Look at me, I'm with this famous person. Or look at me, I am that famous person. Or look at me, I'm a bored person. It's all look at me, 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 me. And into that formula for destruction comes the word of the Lord. Look at him who's able to save you and deliver you from the hell that's coming upon the earth. I won't argue it anymore. I used to say dumb unto death, and now people are dumb unto destruction. And you cannot get away from this fact. Jesus said, if the days weren't shortened, there'd be no flesh left alive. Yet for those, the elect's sake, those are who are his followers, those days will be shortened. That's why everybody's going, I can't believe how fast time has gone. You said it to me, Doug, a couple weeks ago. I say it every day. Man, I'm 63. I still want to live in the 21 to 25-year period and act accordingly, but I can't, okay? So the point is that we're in a time warp, if you will, but what's being warped is a sense of reality, a sense of being able to process real data. And by the way, the Chinese don't suffer from this, the Russians don't suffer from this, and, say what you want about Vladimir Putin, he's no fan of the debilitating effects of a gay military. It's amazing to me that while on vacation, the number one concern of the president was to make sure he made a statement to all the gay, lesbian, transgender people. I'm not picking on them. I'm only saying, good night, brothers and sisters. If you voted for the guy, then you're going to have to share in the judgment that comes upon him. Where is that? It's simple. To whom ye yield yourself, that's whose servant you become. And the point is that you can quote the scripture until you're blue in the face. You can say, oh, I love you, Jesus. Or you can say, praise the Lord, if you're evangelical. But the point is that you can't deny what's happening to the people around the world. And the fact that brutality, and I know a lot of ancient history, and I know a lot of brutality. And obviously we're not to the point where they're slaughtering 40,000 people in a day, cutting out their heart and cutting off their heads. But the point is that we are in that mode where the uniqueness of mankind and the beauty of God's special creation is now called into question, and everything, doesn't matter what country you put a name on, doesn't matter what weapon system you define, everything is designed to simply do this, get rid of all the human beings. And that is only pleasing to one. For God so loved the world, he didn't hate it, yet all you see coming from the religion of the sword is hate, 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 hate. Kill, 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 kill. Blood, 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 blood. And the point is fascinating to me. Jesus didn't stone the woman taken in adultery. He wrote the names of the guys that were committing adultery with her probably in the sand. So no man has done more for the protection of the women in the history of the world than Jesus Christ. Nobody. So when I hear all these, guys talking about this or that or whatever, yet they give a free pass to those who mutilate, who stone, who absolutely do such horrible things to women around the world that I can't even repeat it on talk radio. The point is that ladies wake up, men wake up, people wake up, and the only way you're going to get the national media's attention, which is a weapon, it is psyops. You remember, Doug, when they were talking about a new department in the Pentagon, psychological warfare? Well, they've always done it, but they announced funding for it. Do you remember that?
I do, and you were one of the first ones that alerted me to that fact. Believe it or not, but yes, absolutely.
V, given your understanding of how things work in the world, will you explain to people, because you were both a financial analyst and you're also a weapon system analyst for the big, obviously mega banks you work for, tell people how killing is big money. Can you explain it to them in a I'll get it or I'll make it simple for them, please?
Absolutely. I mean, the same group of people, the same patriarch of a banking family who says, give me the power to print the nation's money and I don't care who makes its laws. The same ilk has also said we make more money in an hour of war than a whole year of peace. So war is big business. There is massive amounts of money to be made. Folks, let's put it to you this way. We go into Iraq, we create destabilization situations there. We prop up a government that we know that is not going to stand. We arm them. Then at the same time we fund a terror group, or we create a terror group and then fund them, called ISIS, and arm them. So now both sides are fighting each other. And the banksters that are really, sitting on top of this pyramidal structure right above the military-industrial complex, the banksters make the most money on both sides. This is what the Rothschilds did going back to Napoleon. When Napoleon went to war against the Russians, the Rothschilds funded both sides. They funded both sides of the war. This is something that's done over and over and over again throughout history. Okay, give case in point. When the Bolshevik Revolution occurred in Russia, 1918, the early 1900s, 1918, I think it was. You had at that time an economy come to a halt. Okay. Their pneumatic pumps on their oil drilling machines were not working. Their mills have shut down. Their factories have been closed because at this point there was a state of shock amongst the population because they did not know what to do, and most of the talented individuals left. They started leaving because they were afraid of what these Bolsheviks, these communists, were planning for their nation. Okay, so the captains of industry were exiting stage right because they knew at that point that their profit and their ability to turn a profit is going to be completely cut off. So what happens? How was this dead economy in the midst of a revolution? And that's what usually happens. You have a revolution that occurs, and oftentimes it causes a massive debilitating blow to the economy. So who kick-started the economy in Russia during the Soviet era? Who kick-started it? Wall Street. Wall Street funded a lot of the operations within Russia and amongst the Bolsheviks to get not only usurp the power of the Tsar and the throne of the Tsar and to take over the government but also to restart and kickstart their economy in spite of laws that were on the books, laws called the Trading with the Enemy Act that was on the books. That Wall Street completely superseded it. It completely circumvented these laws. So they weren't bound by anything. And what happened? Well, little by little by little, Wall Street built up the perfect enemy in order for the United States and the free world to fight against. So at that point, at the end of World War II, you had East versus West. And the banksters made an absolute killing on both sides, folks. So that's what this is all about. This is, we can't just limit it to just nation versus nation. But when you look at the higher levels, it's something much greater. There's a greater game being played, folks, and it's the game of princes. And that's what I want people to understand. This is far beyond just nations and individuals. This whole thing is planned, it's orchestrated, and it's being executed and played out right in front of our eyes.
And you know something, V and Steve, it's sad because not one other talk show host with an audience, not a Sean Hannity, not a Rush Limbaugh, just to name a few, none will go beyond that nation-state level. None will go beyond the partisan politics, or few will go beyond that. It's always limited in terms of the conversation. What V just said, what you just heard, is really the Rosetta Stone of warfare, of welfare, of the global welfare, global warfare as well. I mean, it is the game of kings and princes, and it's the people at the top of the pyramid, the ones who make more money in an hour of war than a year of peace. Steve?
Well, I think what's interesting, I was just thinking, you can get the pig out of the mire, but you can't get the oink out of the pig, okay? And that's just my way of saying the tree is known by the fruit it bears. Jesus did a better job, but since we're dealing with people who are gorging themselves on the flesh, you see, this is the sad point I think that most people are missing. You are a commodity to the New World Order. You are either a commodity to be profited from or a liability to be put to death. I don't think it gets any simpler than that. And, Doug, one of the things that's interesting, one of the ladies you met, one of the intercessors, Manette, just sent me an email, and she said, Steve, they're sending all the illegals to the big cities who have a high population of homosexuals who have very compromised immune systems, i.e. AIDS. They will come down with many diseases, and they will infect everyone else. God has showed that to me with our Men at the Mission. Now, Manette and her husband, Bob, they minister to people, sharing the love of Jesus to, quite candidly, people that no one else would even consider ministering to. So when she says to me as an intercessor, this is what's going to happen, think about it. Someone says, I don't believe that. Well, then you don't know the history of AIDS in Africa. And for the record, Doug, what's going on in Africa, this is one thing that people have got to understand. If you listen to Margaret Sanger, you'd think that basically she was Hitler's, probably was, by the way, she was Hitler's mistress, because what she's talking about is basically a love of death for everybody on the planet. Now, just remember this. Most of the people that say, well, I would gladly take my own life if I could kill 1 million. And my statement is, well, just take your own life and spare us the diatribe, okay? And I'm not saying that in a sarcastic way as, Gene Simmons got in trouble when he made the statement he did. I'm not making that. I'm always saying that it's amazing that for the sake of the planet, everybody must die, except me, of course, You see, the altruism ends at the place where their personal goals are being achieved, and it doesn't matter. And it's like this. It's like the great wealth. Most people don't understand who funded, V knows perfectly well, but who funded the biggest tech companies in the United States. And if you don't know this, you can look it up. You can look up the Central Intelligence Agency's posturing. They actually took their money and they went into big business and turned it into huge business. It's remarkably striking to me that if I talk for 3 hours on Marcus Wolf or Yevgeny Primakov, and that I think it was FEMA that first hired them to set up an internal spy system. I can talk until I'm blue in the face about Facebook, Twitter, all of those social networking sites, but those are weapons, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine this, okay? Take the classic caricature of an SS agent, black leather coat. Take the guy off of Raiders of the Lost Ark, the little round glasses, and I think he had a scar on his face, and smoking a cigarette, or the typical classification of a spy. Imagine that's what's sitting on your computer every minute watching you. It's just like this, Doug. When I was told point blank, and by the gentleman who I brought on your show, and he was accused of doing an infomercial, but he was doing everybody a great favor by saying, look, if you're carrying a smartphone and you're being tracked in real time and all your data gathered at all time, then wouldn't you want to have something to protect that smartphone or keep you from being targeted? Let me make it really clear to everybody. Every gun owner who has a smartphone, and this was told to me, every person of interest who is considered a threat is already targeted in all their targeting computers, either be taken out by aerial assets or ground assets. You follow me? In other words, you don't have to worry about running to your favorite place in the woods with your phone on. I mean, forgive me, you better be worried about running to the place in the woods or whatever. And so something, low tech, $60 protects your phone. Here's what I'm saying. Does it not seem strange to you, Doug, that we go on night after night? You do. I'm only on weekly or whenever, and V's on now weekly on Sunday. And by the way, you had a phenomenal turnout. But the point being is something as easy as a pouch you put your phone in to basically keep you from being targeted. Yet I guarantee you most people who consider themselves ready to rock and roll, and when that day comes, if they have a smartphone or even a throwaway phone, bought it, Walmart or whatever, what do they call them, track phones. The point being, the minute you buy a track phone and start calling anybody, your voice is already printed, voice printing. That voice printing immediately matches up, and we're talking about almost infinite amounts of data storage and speeds yet not admitted to by the NSA and others. So follow with me, Doug, okay? We're talking about freedom. We're talking about the day is going to come. We're talking about that. And all of us, and I have a smartphone. Unfortunately, I became aware through my friends sharing with me that I got to keep it in my little pouch. So the point is that if I want to use it, now the minute you use a smartphone, obviously your location is given away. But if there are times you want it for an emergency, but you don't want to be tracked in real time, throw it in the silent pocket. That's not a pitch for a product. It's a pitch for your life. It's amazing. I used to say this, V, all the time. Starting the survival movement, 3.5 decades ago with a couple other guys, I used to say, look, people come into your home, they sell you life insurance. They tell you used to see the syrupy things on commercials. You die, you don't want your wife being cast out on the street. None of us do. We want our kids to be taken care of for whatever reason. That's called life insurance. The minute you start talking about a proactive mindset to take control of that which you can take control of, life assurance, everybody acts as if you're on some foreign planet or something. The idea is simply this: we are now in a position to be monitored. I believe Snowden deserves the real Nobel Peace Prize, and I believe the guy that won it has to give it back, or it should be demanded back. But because the same powers that be that control the power structure of the world award those things, they usually don't give them to true, maybe in chemistry and the sciences, but when it comes to the Nobel Peace Prize and stuff, and some of the people that have been recipients of it, you got to look and say, how did that guy ever get it? Saying all that to say this: if you can do what you can do to keep from being targeted, then do it. Then do it. If you've got a smartphone, if you've got a dumbass phone, you know what a dumbass phone is? A dumbass phone is one that basically the guys just think willy-nilly, and that's that dumbass speak in a biblical term. The bottom line is that they're how do I say this? Not only broadcasting their location, but they're also broadcasting all the data. We are in a cyber war 24/7 right now. I told people that it was told to me by certain people that one of the things that the Chinese plan to do when they land on the West Coast and other places, and people just can't receive this. All the people on Facebook and Twitter, the girls and the dating sites and everything, they've already matched them up with their soldiers. Pastor Langford gave a powerful word. He said, Steve, we were in bondage. We're now going into captivity. Can you believe that, V? Does that sound strange to you? Because does that not sound just like the ancients, to the victors go the spoil? Or is it not living out for us right before our very eyes, Boko Haram and other places in Nigeria where they're just stealing young ladies and raping them, etc.? Am I off on that, V?
No, you're not off on that at all. I mean, look at what ISIS is doing with the women, the Yazidi women. I just don't know how to pronounce that.
Yazidis,
yeah. The ethnic group that's in Iraq. What are they doing? They're just getting these women and killing off their husbands, killing off the sons, and if there's their daughter, they'll take her, and the pretty ones they separate, and then basically tell them, listen, here's the deal: either you convert to Islam or you're going to basically die, and that's what it is. Okay. And you see Boko Haram, what are they doing? They're kidnapping young boys. They're kidnapping young girls. Let me tell you folks a little secret here. Here's a little dirty little secret about fundamentalist Islam. Okay? It is, not only at one level, I want folks to really pay attention to this. At one level, fundamentalist Islam, yes, it's violent, it's grotesque, it is a death cult. Okay? It is a death cult. But let's take it one step further. Did you know that on top of being a death cult, it's also a pedophilic death cult? Did any of you know that? Did you know that most of the high-ranking members of the Taliban have an affinity towards young boys? Oh, yes, they do. Yes, they do. It's called they're called dancing boys. Okay? One of the things that the Soviets were so terrified about these crazy Afghanis is what they would do to a prisoner if they caught you. They would literally strap a Russian prisoner, tie him up, and the entire battalion of fighters would take turns raping him. So why do you think they want the female genital mutilation? Why do you think they want that? Why do you think they want the most stringent form of Sharia law where women are wearing burqas? And if you understand the history of burqas, it's something that the royalty wore. Because the queens in the ancient Middle East were so beautiful that they'd wear these veils so that the sun doesn't parch their skin. It was a sign of nobility. And then when she'd come into the inside of a building or a palace, he'd of course take her burqa off. The fundamentalist Islam has taken that, subverted it, and is using it as some sort of a jail cell for women. Okay? And these are the things. Why do you think they do it? Why do you think they hate women? They don't want women to drive. If they're walking outside, the women have to walk like 30 feet behind their husbands. Women are like cattle. I mean, why? And in fact, the majority level of these Islamic terrorists, they have no idea why. There's something coming down from their imams. But their imams understand. You see, the top level guys who sit on top of the thing, it is a homosexual death cult. There you go. I called it for what it is. It is a pedophilic, and let's call pedophiles for what they are. They're homosexuals. It is a homosexual, pedophilic death cult. Now, do you understand why these people get funding from individuals in the U.S. and as well as Europe? Because it's the same cult. No matter if they paint a veneer of fundamentalist Islam over themselves, or if they paint a veneer of a European bankster or a royal what's it be, the veneer of an American industrialist. They're all part of the same cult. They're all part of the same clique. You see, there's a reason why 5.5 million kids go missing every year in this country. And that's a whole other big topic that I'm going to probably say for another day. Steve.
One of the things that is striking, Doug, you and I talked about this before the show, just in talking about what to cover tonight. And could you believe that it would be stated? See, I believe the Lord is making sure that people understand. In essence, ladies and gentlemen, the United States is on trial. We have had the prosecuting attorney basically laying out the evidence, and now we're just waiting. The verdict has already been passed. People, again, I get emails. Why don't you ask people to pray 2 Chronicles 7:14? Because it's too late for that. Well, you're a negative giver. You don't give people any hope. Oh, yes, I do. I give people the hope of their calling. His name is Jesus. I quote the scripture over and over and over. Friendship with this world is enmity with God. Jesus said, they hated me, they're going to hate you. They persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. But yet the silence, Doug, of what the Western church, both in Europe and in the United States, as to the slaughter, the most heinous, the most disgusting, the most illicit acts of one human being to another. And by the way, I believe it's fueled by demonic appetites, the lust. There is a bloodlust in demons. They have to have it satisfied. The blood is going to boil. And by the way, I just got an email. This is fascinating. Listen to this, Doug. This is out of, I think, the Jerusalem Post, and Zero Hedge is also reporting it. Islamic State to the United States, we will drown all of you in blood. Well, Henry Gruver's traveling around the world to remit blood guiltiness, and yet we're watching blood guiltiness, and what do? We're like the kid that whistles by what do they say, whistle by the graveyard, And yet it's no longer a graveyard, it's the slaughter fields. What Pol Pot did is not even on the level of what's being done. Oh, don't get me wrong, he was ruthless, he was brutal and everything else, but you know what? The silence is the greatest evidence against the church in America. Don't give me that religious garbage. Religious garbage is what has kept people impotent. It is what has kept people blind. It is what has kept people passive. And by the way, Jesse Pan Lewis in her book War on the Saints, which you can download, said the most dangerous place for Christians to come under the assault and influence of evil spirits is when they adapt a spirit of passivity. Go look it up, ladies and gentlemen. Passivity will get you captive. Captivity will get you executed. That's why many people are going to die before their time. And that's why Psalm 27 is so important, Doug. So passivity. You cannot approach these times in any more of a passive state. You've got to be active. You've got to be actively praying. You've got to be actively doing anything. Now somebody says, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, whatever the Lord tells you to do. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, please keep Jeremiah and his relief team, in your prayers. By the grace of God, the listeners to your show have just been a blessing, Doug. They've gotten the money they need now to go over and make a difference. They're obviously going to be there to help as many as they can, and I love it when men of God and their wives know the cost it may cost them, but these people are laying it on the line for the people of God and doing something. Somebody once said, I don't care what you do, just do something. Well, that's not necessarily the case. You have to do what the Lord shows you to do. But I'm done with cheerleaders, 1 minute they're saying, God bless you, Brother V, and the next minute they're putting another word after God. To me, Steve, the bottom line is that it's astonishing to me. If you look at the fickleness of humanity, by the way, Jesus didn't trust any man because he knew it was in their heart. That's why I tell everybody, Doug, for 20-some years on talk radio, take it to the Lord in prayer. Go look up all the sources. I don't put up however many stories I put up on my website just because I'm trying to fill space. As a matter of fact, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you have to, my stories always scroll. If I get 20 new ones tonight, the old ones you saw today are still there. You just have to go down the bottom and go to the next page. But the point being is that how much evidence, Doug, what's the turning point in a legal case when you go and have testified, on behalf of whoever your client was? What is the turning point? When is the turning point realized in a court of law?
I'm not exactly certain what you mean, Steve, but
after, look, I'll make it easy. Isn't it after all evidence has been presented?
Oh, yes,
and,
yes.
And the jury rules, okay?
Oh, sure. That's
right
correct,
now,
yes.
ladies and gentlemen, there are people all over the planet. The evidence is being presented. It's in your headlines. It's in your helplessness. It's in your hopelessness. It's in your dire circumstances. It's in been looking for jobs. That's all evidence. It's all evidence. And that's why we're in a position now where there are no longer spectators. It may work with the NFL, and I have my own statement on that whole thing, but the bottom line is, we must become active participants. And look, V can tell you this, that when Russia wants the Ukraine, they'll go for the Ukraine. And V, just bringing people up to speed, obviously we're seeing major build up on the borders. What are your sources telling you, or are they just the sources that are sticking to their guns? I mean, is there anything that's changed when you said months ago that Russia will go in to the Ukraine? And obviously they're already there and they're spec ops and stuff, but what's your statement on the Ukraine right now?
Well, one of the things that, people always say is, hey, if you talk about a mid-July to late July date, obviously that hasn't happened. One of the things that people have to understand in the intelligence business, even when you look at even these very elites themselves, nobody could plan something 100%. Nobody could project something 100%. So when, I hear something that I know has come from a very credible, very, very credible source, then I pass it on. Okay, that doesn't mean the information exactly how they say it and when it's going to say it. Okay, because there's always a margin of error, and these things can end 1,000 different ways. That being said, okay, the thing that really derailed a Russian response, and check this out, folks. This is very convenient. We're looking at mid-July. There was supposed to be a Russian response mid to late July. What happened mid-July that kind of derailed the Russians? Flight MH17. You see that?
Oh.
And there you go. Do you get it?
Yep.
Yeah.
And what was being reported when before MH17 was about to go down? Everybody was talking about a Russian buildup on the Ukraine border. All of a sudden, MH17 gets shot out of the sky, and the Russian response has to stop. The MH17 also served a purpose, amongst all others, to stop a Russian response, to slow it down, which now the Russians had to go ahead and get their crack team of investigators in to go ahead and defend themselves. But they're not the ones who shot this plane down. Now, fast forward to where we are today. Okay. The same people are saying, V, there's going to be a response. We could probably see it right now and probably September. And what's happened? Well, we've seen the Ukrainians last Friday, they shelled a Russian convoy. And today there is fighting. Just occurred. Just 3 hours ago, there's fighting confirmed between the Ukraine military forces and Russian separatists. Again, over a convoy. While this is being done, okay, you got to understand we're approaching winter. Okay, we're approaching the time when it's going to get cold. It's going to be another cold, brutal winter this year. Okay? We've had a very cold summer. It's going to be a brutal winter. Now, it is very important to the European market as well that the South Stream pipeline gets completed. Russia has two pipelines, Nord Stream and South Stream, that circumvent the Ukraine. Okay? The South Stream, because the Russians knew eventually the NATO is going to make a play for, the Americans are going to make a play for Ukraine. They knew that. I mean, they read Brzezinski's book in 97 when Brzezinski said that they're going to have to take Ukraine. This thing's been in place since 97, so the Russians are well aware of it. That's why they were creating the Nord Stream pipeline and the South Stream. The Nord Stream's complete. Now they're waiting for the South Stream to come on. It's got to cut through Bulgaria. Bulgaria today, just a few minutes ago, and this is hot off the press, just about 3 to 5 minutes ago, announced that they're halting the completion of the South Stream pipeline because all of a sudden NATO just moved 12 F-15 fighter aircraft along with military personnel into that area. This, hot on the heels that we just moved an Aegis-class missile cruiser, a Ticonderoga-class Aegis cruiser, into the Black Sea. Couple that with a French cruiser, which is pretty interesting. So you see, folks, the things are being built up. There will be a Russian response, and my sources are indicating, heck, even W's sources are indicating the September time frame, because it's at that time they're getting ready for the winter, things are starting to cool, and it works very well to the Russians, because, look, let me tell you something about the Russians. They fight very well in the cold. They are masters at fighting in the harsh winter and when it gets cold. So this is what they're getting geared up for. Okay, the ground will be nice and hard, getting ready for the tanks to roll through, and I think that's the timeline. So that's what's happening in the Ukraine, folks. It's being built up. It's being provoked. They're pushing even the Europeans into a rock and a hard place. See, the Americans have the neo-Satanists that run this nation were pretty smart. What they did is this. They knew that jeopardizing the Ukraine and subverting the Ukraine is going to put the European economy in jeopardy. It's going to put the Europeans in a situation where they just can't sit out anymore. Either A, they join the fight with the Americans and go fight the Russians, or what's the other answer? They're going to fight the Americans? See the predicament they put the continent of Europe in. The European economy is stuck between a rock and a hard place. If they don't do something soon, their economies are going to suffer heavily this winter. And, folks, the gas that the Russians supply is just not for cooking and heating. No, that's more than that. Factories run off of it. There's going to be a massive economic drain this winter when energy costs go through the roof because there's not enough natural gas, and everybody's projecting it to be a very cold winter. There's not enough natural gas to power their economies. So Europeans have to do something. So this is turning out to be a very, very precarious situation. Whether willingly or unwillingly, the whole entire World War III or a limited war in the European theater hinges on the fact and the reality of how greedy the European bureaucrats are, how much they love the American dollar. That's what's going to dictate the outcome of Europe, is how big of a lackey are these people. And, folks, why are they doing this? Well, this is basically the cabal of the group or the organization or the club of the most insolvent nations in the world trying to hold on to some sort of relevancy. Now, do you think for an instance that the dragon, which has been pretty quiet this whole entire time, is going to sit idly by and watch their economic partner get encroached upon? I don't think so. Europe is going to absolutely have a cow. They're going to crap a brick when the Chinese enter the fray. Because at that point, they're going to have to say, you know what, we don't want to get into this fight because this is suicide at this point. And this is going to turn out to be an American embarrassment. Remember the time frame that my general source said. 2015 is supposed to be a complete undermining of the United States dollar. And a lot of other top military sources have corroborated and confirmed the very same bit of information. 2015. So in other words, another major catastrophic, embarrassing event has to occur where now not only does the United States look like a toothless tiger and with no claws, but now it's going to be viewed not only as a toothless tiger, but an absolute pussycat, a relevant weakling who has so much internal domestic issues and crisis within and without to deal with that they should have no right to be a world reserve currency. They shouldn't have the right to be the petrodollar. And that's where the hit's going to come from, folks. That's what you're going to have to keep a lookout for. And that's what we see transpiring.
V, can you put that in the context, if you don't mind? I wrote an article a while back. This is now probably over a year and a half ago, titled Obama Official, We Will Just Kill the Dollar. This references Kyle Bass's conversation with an administration official, unnamed but believed to be Timothy Geithner, that the fact that they're just going to kill the dollar. And with what you just said, what are we looking at here? We're looking at a homicide of our economy, our sovereignty, our everything that we hold dear as a result of this. I'm not saying the U.S. dollar that we hold dear, but the fact is, it's our sovereignty, it's our middle class, it's our wealth, it's our. But that said, put that in context. I'm trying to make sense of this. It's going to be an attack from within as well as from the outside. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in order for you to kill the dollar, you got to do two things. First, you got to do it from within. And how do you do it from within? Well, you print the money to oblivion, okay? This way you're creating an absolute inflation within the money supply. They're doing that. The second thing what you need to do in order to kill the dollar is you have to embarrass it internationally. You have to besmirch the reputation of the United States government on a world stage. You're going to have to make them look bad. You're going to have to make them look like A, reckless, irresponsible bullies. You want to make them look absolutely irrational, absolutely nonsensical, and totally self-serving within their own self-interest with no regard to anybody else. And that's what they're doing. In other words, the characters that have been placed in this White House, that have been placed in government, and that's on both sides of the aisle, the Democrats and the Republicrats, two wings on the same dragon. They are both fulfilling a perfect role. They're both doing a masterful act, and that is destroying the nation from within and without. That's how you kill the dollar, Doug. You hyperinflate it to oblivion. You create monetary policy that ensures the destruction of your economy. You create circumstances and situations abroad where it absolutely undermines and brings embarrassment to your currency and to the government which issues it. And on top of that, you create as much fraud as possible. And in the midst of creating the fraud, gentlemen, you make sure you leave enough breadcrumbs lying around that those who investigate the fraud begin to vet you and cite you as the very source of the fraud. I mean, how do you like it? You can't paint the better picture, but that's how you do it. It is a complete fifth column.
Wow. Captured from within. Steve.
Well, how do I say this? America didn't die from externalism and external armies first and foremost. It died from its will to survive, and it died when and I'm serious, it died when it basically allowed the left to steal our heritage, to mock God, You know, here's the thing. You can't argue with the nation that was set above all nations. You can't argue with the respect and honor. Yet look who came on the scene and look what it is now. And I said, Doug, years ago, I think it was over 4 years ago, maybe even longer than that, and someone who's got a better memory can say it, but I said the Lord has declared it. America will be held in such contempt that we will become a hissing sound in the nostrils of those nations around us. Where we were once respected, we will be absolutely mocked and ridiculed. When we were once held in the highest esteem, we'll be trodden underfoot of those who looked to America for more, but look what it's become. The spineless jellyfish, and I call it jellyfishianity. I coined that term on your show, and I mean that. A jellyfish just floats along with the current. It takes all the little micro sea creatures into its tentacles, but basically it goes with the flow. Jellyfishianity and the congressional critters have given it away. They've sold us out. And just as Judas sold out Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, these guys are selling out cheap. I even had a Russian spy at one time just laugh. He was drunk and I was sober. But he said, oh, you Americans, you sell out for so little. He says, when we betray our country, we go for millions. And I think he was referring to Pollard or somebody at that time, one of the guys that basically didn't do it for much money. And the point is, Doug, is that now there's no pulling back. So here's the thing I want people to understand. Tonight, after the show, I want you, those of you who are Christians and are believers, I want you to go. Get on your knees or go in your closet or kneel by the side of your bed. Turn off all sources of any additional input and just wait silently before the Lord and thank Him and say, Lord, show me the legal proceedings being carried out in heaven. Ask Him to give you a dream. Ask Him to give you a vision. But I want it to be understood more than anything tonight, Doug, that we're in the process of where the prosecuting attorney, and his name happens to be the God of the creator of heaven and earth, you know, I call him the Lord God of heaven, whose son is Jesus Christ. We have an advocate with the Father. For those of us who have been sinners, Jesus is our defense attorney. But that doesn't stop the Father from issuing judgment upon the nation. And that's the biggest point of contention I have with my emails. People can't get over the fact that it's over. Someone says, well, you know, and they can say negative or whatever, but look at the standard of living. Look at the death of the middle class. Look at the statement even today, and it's been the story that, you know what, half of Americans have nothing saved for retirement, and yet look at the people being paid $6,000 a month to take in immigrant children. Look at the people coming in this country who end up with bennies and all the government aid of $30,000, $24,000 to $30,000. Well, look at all the students who have huge debt, in some of them six-figure. And if you're going into medicine, and look at what's gone on with Obamacare. Look at how many doctors and nurses are leaving the field. The point is it's all eugenics by design. The elderly, instead of being recognized and being grateful and honored, they're chattel to be thrown out, to be trodden underfoot. The babies who are the next generation, they're to be destroyed as a sacrifice to Lucifer. Their blood runs even now in the heavenlies as high as a horse's bridle. And I don't know, and I can't prove this, but I believe that because the nation wants blood, I believe the Lord is going to allow all the blood of the slaughtered innocents to run. No one's ever said that before that I know of. I've never said that before that I know of. And until the people of God get sick of the blood that's being senselessly spilled, to the murder of the innocents, to the absolute slaughter of women worldwide. And look, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm going to say this. There is no greater friend to womanhood worldwide than the Lord Jesus Christ. No greater emancipator, no greater defense attorney, no greater elevator, not over a man, but because of his godliness and because of his calling and because of laying down his life. There's no one more wonderful than Jesus in sharing his blood. And you know, it's real simple. We're either going to take the blood of a lamb and believe in Jesus Christ through faith in his word and by the Holy Spirit in our yield and surrender and our repentance, or we're going to be covered in blood. That's it. I'm sorry. There are no, well, maybe I can just hang out on another planet and wait until this one becomes more susceptible to my idea of the way of fairness. No. Listen, the war is against you. The war is raging against you, yet God said, fear not, for I've given you power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. You know, V said an amazing thing, and I've never heard it said that way before. Republicans and Democrats, just two different wings of the same dragon. I commend you for that, V. I'm going to incorporate that because that's way, way more definitive. Doug, do we got to take a break? Do we have to take a break?
Yes, we do, and that's up there with jellyfishiosity. I can't get over that.
Jellyfishianity.
I'm sorry, jellyfishianity. Oh man, we have to have a new lexicon for Steve Quayle.
With that, we'll go to the top of the hour break, folks. We're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann report on this Monday, August 18th, with our special guest V from the roguemoney.net, and Steve from Steve Quayle.
It's our third and final hour of the Hagmann and Hagmann report for this day, this Monday, August 18th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann. In studio with me is Joe Hagmann, my son, fellow investigator, fellow researcher, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report. You know what, ladies and gentlemen? Let me just bump in here and say this. I'd like everyone to really, when you do hit your knees tonight in prayer, as Steve mentioned, I'd like you to pray for both Steve and V. Are you noticing a drag? And this is not to take anything away from either one of them, but I got to tell you something. You look at this information, and it really, there is this incredible drag upon you, upon a physical person, your physical health and your mental stress. I mean, it's very stressful when you follow this information and you attempt to package it, for example, the way V packages it in digestible portions for us to listen to it, and Steve the same way. So please pray for these two gentlemen, for their strength, for their health, and for their safety, because I got to tell you, this is not light subject matter. This is pretty rough stuff, but you need to hear it, and these two gentlemen are giving of their time. The way I look at it, we've got a platform. We're here, but these two gentlemen in particular are gifting their time to all of us. So with having said that, I just want to thank UV, the Guerrilla Economist. His website, by the way, folks, and bookmark his website, roguemoney.net, just off of a fantastic debut radio the show this past weekend, and of course Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com. I talked to him. I think it was it was early my time, or it was early my time for crying out loud, so it had to be early his time. I don't think the guy ever sleeps. But with that, Steve, I'll turn it back over to you, sir, and you can direct us where you want.
Well, thank you, Doug. I think we're at the point now where one of Tom Horn's major concerns, and it's mine also, is that tonight V and I are talking about, cursory defense systems and the failure and the treason, but the greatest battlefield I know raging right now is in test tubes and laboratories, where the human genome is being, how should I say this, dissected and put together in the most horrific configurations. Somebody said, where's the next battlefield? I said, it's being fought in the laboratories, in secret laboratories and underground laboratories with creatures that, quite candidly, my best attempt, even by explaining them mythologically and in the contents of historic legends, it fails. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, it's so critical when you understand how wonderful it was when God created man in his image and likeness, and why the devil hates that more than anything in the world. And what you see every time you see some poor guy being shot, and whatever the reason, there are other ways to restrain a guy than blowing him, shooting him 6 times. And I understand I'm not a policeman, but I also know this, that watching everything that I see on YouTube and watching, the abuse of power and the military and stuff, what that is contempt for human life. And I, for one, believe that it's my goal, and I believe V believes this too, to inform. We want you to get out of harm's way. If that's scary, so be it. But before you go calling it doom porn, just say this. Say, what's changed in the last couple years, 4 years, maybe 6 years, that wasn't like this before? And you're going to come up with an agenda. But you're not just going to come up with a political agenda or the old paradigm of the left or right. What you're seeing is supernatural Satanism. What you're seeing is the unseen becoming visible. What you're seeing is nightmares walking the streets, not only in the nighttime but in the daytime. What you're seeing is the most horrific destruction of the beauty of mankind through everything that people are doing to their bodies. I saw the article today, Doug, that some guy had 453 piercings and horn implants. Well, you know, what happens when those horrific and grotesque images that people tattoo their bodies with become real? I talked to Matthew Abbott about that. He wrote one of the chapters in my book on xenogenesis, a tattoo artist, a shaman who got saved, and he was at the Whitestone Conference, and what a neat brother. But what happens when those images literally and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but when the images that are on the inside start manifesting themselves on the outside, how is it that these grotesque figures are beyond what even science fiction guys can design? It's simple. That's their nature. And for the people that are absolutely invoking the powers of hell and the entities of hell, when they burst forth out of their chest like an alien movie or out of their skin, then I think that people will understand that this body that the living God created to be one way is being destroyed in every way possible, whether it's the air, whether it's the water, chemtrails, food, GMO, non-GMO, vaccinations. And again, I want to deal with the Ebola thing. The battlefield is in the test tube. The test tube is the battlefield. I devoted 20 years of my life on biological weapons. I'm not, by training, I am not a virologist. I am not a molecular biologist or by any means. But what I am is somebody that knows that if you follow the root of something, you're going to see where that root will produce fruit. So the battlefield is for the very soul of mankind. It's for the very existence of mankind. And how can you look at your children? How can you look at your grandchildren and stay silent, stay passive, stay indifferent, and stay in the seat of the scornful, Doug? If most people that do nothing but hang out on boards would absolutely start to look at, and it is a chief complaint of mine, as I shared years ago, and someone said, "Who are you to tell me to get off Facebook?" No one, just somebody saying, hey, get off your faces and get on your face before the Lord. Look, I have brothers and sisters I know, and some of them you know well. They're on Facebook. I can't tell them to get off, but if they ask me, I say, you shouldn't be on that. Well, you don't know, Brother Steve, about my witness. You don't know, Brother Steve, how big my ministry is. That's like, in my opinion, saying you're just a little bit pregnant. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the Scripture says have nothing to do with the hidden works of darkness. And a little leaven leavens a whole lump. And somebody said, well, I don't care. Well, of course you don't, or you wouldn't be on there. The very fact that the root of all social networking sites, hear me, was set up by Marcus Wolf, the quintessential spy master for East Germany, and Yevgeny Primakov of the Soviet Union, KGB spy master, that ought to cause most people to sit up and take notice. How can you forgive the word, and I won't use that word, how can you complain and whine and take on the whole issue? If you're in the devil's ball game, get out of the devil's ball game. And for the record, if most, quote, men who enjoy NFL or NBA or, whatever those games are, baseball, basketball, hockey, it doesn't matter, since when is that redemptive? Well, you don't understand. It helps me to take my mind off the world. No, I do understand, and that's exactly what they're designed for. Psychological warfare is it at an unparalleled, energy level right now. They're blasting us with everything they can. They're preparing us for the New World Order. And as the United Nations spokesman said, there will be a New World Order. You either go into it willingly or you die and get off the planet. So that's where we're at. The battlefield is a test tube. And, Doug, I think about this. Thanks for asking prayer because, obviously I'm dealing with my own mortality. I have my friend Greg Evenson, and I want to thank each and every one of you that offered him a kidney. I watch Hawk suffer, go through this stuff. I watch Oyears, a mighty man of God, a mighty man of valor, and just the crap the VA throws at him, and then all the spy agencies, they're worried that he might, quote, break his oath, and the torment and the fear and the attempts on his wife's life. And I want to tell you sometimes, I want to scream. Maybe that's why the Lord won't let me scream. I physically can't scream. My vocal cords won't allow me. But instead of that, I start praising God. I start praising God for the solution. I start praising God for the Word of God, which says the whole world lies in the evil one. I thank God for the young men. I thank God for Timothy Alberino. I thank God for V. I thank God that V's not ashamed of the gospel. He basically, he's got a magnificent testimony, and he's also been gifted. You see, man's giftings aren't for us to sit and take selfies with. The giftings are to help others come into the fullness of knowledge. And Doug, you get them, I get them, David Langford gets them, V gets them, but people send us emails all the time. Thank you for helping me to come back to Jesus. You know, there's nothing greater that can be said than that. Thank you for helping me to come back to Jesus, or thank you for leading me to Jesus. Because my Bible says that they that win souls are wise. My Bible says that they will be as the stars that shine in the sky, and all the heavens declare the glory of God. So while we're winning souls and bringing people back to the Lord Jesus Christ, the glory of God is amplified beyond even what we see in the night. And eyes not seen, nor ear heard, nor entered in the heart of man at any time, the things that the Lord has prepared for those who love him. I know this. I know too much stuff, okay? And with much wisdom, or excuse me, not much wisdom, but with much knowledge comes much sorrow. But I would trade it all just for a touch of the Master's hand. I would trade it all in a heartbeat just to once again say, Lord, thank you for your redemption. Thank you for your knowledge. I don't want knowledge. I mean, I got a lot of knowledge, and I'm not saying I'm wise. I just have a lot of knowledge. But facts without wisdom, all they do is basically trouble your heart and mind. But the wisdom comes in knowing that Jesus in Proverbs 8, go read Proverbs 8, everybody. When it says, I, wisdom, that's talking about Jesus Christ, because it said that Jesus was made the wisdom of God to us. That's what the Apostle Paul says. So what I'm doing, Doug, and I know that V's doing, and I'm going to turn it right over to him now, is we're trying to give you the best scope of what we've been either given by the Lord or gifted with, to try and get people to understand they can act. They don't have to be victims. They can be victors. That used to be, I think, a byline I used to say. It's always better to be a victor than a victim. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I say this, that thanks be to the Lord Jesus Christ, who gives us the victory. And the one word that is so lacking from the modern expression of the redeemed to the Redeemer is triumph. Because that's a scripture that basically means after everything that's come against you, after everything that's brought you down, throwing you down, sure, you may have been thrown down, ground your face in the mud, and gone swimming with the pigs as a backslider, but the Lord lifts you up and he washes your face, he washes your heart, and he gives you a new countenance. Go ahead, V.
V, are you there, my friend? All right.
I'm sorry, for some reason the phone's cutting in and out. Could you repeat the last thing you guys said?
You are cutting out.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on to it.
Well, it's interesting, folks, how this is working when we're talking about everything from genocide to weapon systems, that we've got these technical problems. It's to be expected, obviously. The last thing that was said was basically just about the weight of knowledge about everything that's taking place, really being a weight on our souls, I suppose, Steve. That's kind of how you framed it, I believe. But you know what? I don't know. Can you hear us now? All right.
Yeah, just try to switch some channels here on my phone.
Okay.
Hopefully this works.
Okay, you can take us where you want to take us.
You know, what Steve said is this. I mean, what we're trying to do is let people know, okay, that there's a lot of data out there. And when you start to take these bits and pieces of data, you start putting it together, it starts to create a very, very clear and vivid picture. Okay? Now, we could all be wrong on dates. We could all be wrong on timing. But there's a convergence here. Okay, whether certain events happen or not, there are certain guarantees. Okay, what I mean by that is this: irrespective of exactly how this whole thing ends, irrespective of how exactly this collapse plays out, one thing that is for certain is that there will be a collapse. In fact, I don't even want to say there will be a collapse. People need to understand one thing, and one thing very good right now. We are collapsing. We are in the midst of a collapse. For the government to admit that we have negative 3% GDP growth, actual numbers are we're actually contracting about 3.5% to 4% per year. Okay, that's how bad the economy is contracting. The collapse is here, folks. Okay, it hasn't been as accelerative as we thought it would be, as many people, or even how some people are expecting it to be. It's been a slow burn. It's been a slow motion cascading collapse. And most people are not bearing any sort of attention to this simply because they are being fed wrong data by the mainstream media. And when I see wrong data, one of the things that people always gravitates towards is the Dow Jones. They'll see the Dow at 16,500, 17,000 points, and they equate that with economic health, when nothing can be farther from the truth. The numbers that Wall Street's putting out there, folks, these are not numbers based on any sort of reality. These are fabricated, fictitious, and outright lies. That's what those numbers are. So it's not something that we can rely upon. Okay, so what do you rely upon? Well, you have to look at economics at a macro level. Understand what the world is doing and the things in the world that are occurring. Because when you start paying attention to that, you begin to see that there is a massive trend away from the dollar. There's a massive trend away from the United States being the apex or the fulcrum on which the world power balances. It's no longer going to be that fulcrum. This whole thing is being replaced. The old system is being done away with. Folks, look, let me ask you this. Show me a part of the world right now that is not facing some sort of tension. And I guarantee you'll be hard-pressed to find any sort of developing country or any sort of industrialized country that is not under some sort of economic or national or military-type threats or tension. Worldwide, there is massive chaos that's occurring right now. This is happening because a system that we are all familiar with, that system is dying, and that system is being done away with. And that's what's occurring, folks. All these are symptomatic shockwaves that are occurring that are eventually bringing this whole thing down. I want you to visualize it this way. Picture, if you will, you have a tall structure, a skyscraper, and each floor is held by trusses. We are, economically speaking, in a pancake collapse. We're not imploding like the World Trade Center. But a pancake collapse, if anybody were to witness it, is not something that occurs very rapidly. In fact, it's something that occurs, it's quick, and I say that's quick, look how fast things have evolved since 2008 till today. But it's a pathway of most resistance. So we are floor by floor, truss by truss is breaking. This whole system, the whole building of the petrodollar system, the whole entire banking system as we know it, and the various apparatuses that are attached to it. And what are the apparatuses that are attached to banking? Well, it happens to be government and the military-industrial complex. All these things are falling apart. All these things are collapsing and creating tension and stress and chaos as they begin to clash and bang against one another. The old system is being done away with. And what we're trying to do for you folks is to let you recognize that this is occurring and not let you for 1 second.
You cut out there for a minute, second.
Can you hear me now?
Right after you said the word second, you cut out.
Interesting. What we're trying to do is not let you take it easy, okay? You need to relax. You need to enjoy life. You need to do all these things. But don't lose sight of the fact of what's important. The imminent approaching, the imminent arrival of these events should make your life that much more appreciative into the minutiae and the details of daily life. The most mundane things should have more meaning to you. You should slow down a little bit and begin to appreciate the things that you have been blessed with and things that you have. And then while you do that, you have to make the right preparations to make sure that when you come out on the other end of this whole entire thing, that you have a semblance, the worst, or if you're blessed enough to hold on to as much of a normalcy as you possibly can. And normalcy, folks, is not something that is defined by the things you possess or the things that you own. Normalcy is something that is what I feel to be a state of mind within yourselves and amongst those whom are your loved ones. And that's the whole thing here, folks. There are great and grievous events that are occurring worldwide. We are on the chopping block. Excuse me. We are on the chopping block. And we are being carved up. Your country has been sold out. And there are many of those who think, well, once we collapse and we go into this whole thing, someone wants to trade with us. Someone, we'll be able to rebuild our infrastructure and rebuild our economy and this, that, and the other, and get back into the marketplace. Yeah, you could. Only if you overthrow the yoke of your enslavement. Only if you overthrow the powers that be that have their boot to the back of your neck. Unless the populace awakens and understands and begins to identify who their slave masters are, they have no hope in creating anything on the other side of this whole entire collapse. Steve.
One of the things is that basically Abraham looked for a city whose builder and maker was the Lord, and the thing is that I think that there's something happening, Doug and Joe and V, as the days grow darker. The promise and the brightness of his coming, I'm talking the second coming of Jesus, is becoming more and more the focus. I think the greatest tragedy, too, V, especially in Christians or those who profess to be Christians, is they don't understand that we will all stand before the living God and give account. And one of the things that is the most perplexing to me is the fact that people who know better still sit, and I'm praying that after this show and others they get out, but still sitting in a mausoleum hoping that they'll find life there. Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. And it's also amazing to me that with the acceleration, again, let's just take two issues we talked about tonight just to basically refresh everyone's memory. We have the situation where the entire U.S. Navy was rendered inoperable, and basically the ship had to be towed, I believe, to port, and then there was a mass defection of naval officers who quit. You couple that with the 8,000 naval officers who are going to, not officers, but the master sergeant equivalent in the Navy. I forget what they call them. The point being is that we coupled that with the 500 majors in the Army the other day, and all of, just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, between 2009 and 2013, up to 2009, there were 5,000, I believe it was 5,030, people who had been forced out of the military. In 2011, it was 11,300. So the amount of people that are being forced out, and these guys are being forced out with their benefits, And again, Doug and V and Joe, this is one of the things, in my opinion, the two great sins of the United States are abortion and the abandonment of the, I'm going to put them together, the abandonment of the elderly and of the veterans. Every single law. Now, somebody who's a Native American said, Steve, every Native American knows what's happening to the vets. It's happened to us. If you listen to a liar make a promise, can a promise by a liar ever be fulfilled? Absolutely not. Again, but Doug, Joe, V, every day people turn on the same vomitous lying diatribe by switching channels, and then they go to something when they think they've gotten the news, and whether it's Justin Bieber, I use this only as an illustration, I could care less, or Selena, or the Kardashians. The Kardashians is probably the best example of narcissism at its highest focus and in the faces of the people of this country. And it's amazing to me that when narcissism is elevated, Jesus said, if any man is going to follow after him, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow the Lord. Well, I used to know an old photo salesman. I had some photo stores, Doug V, years ago. That was my first business when I was like 21, and that's a long time ago now. But his name was Bob. His last name, I'll just say, was R. And he used to always come in, and the first thing out of his mouth was, deny yourself nothing. Well, to a hedonist, I'm sure that appeals. But he died a very lonely, broken man, abandoned by his family. Evidently, he should have denied himself and embraced his family. I hear this every day, Doug, and I'm going to speak to the husbands now and the wives. If you're giving your husband a hard time because he's prepping, or husband, you're giving a wife a hard time because she's prepping, or, there's people out there that I met, God bless you, Ann M., and others who are literally finding out what Jesus said, the enemies of a man's life or a woman's life will be those of his own household. The point is that everything's going to fail. And whether you like it or not, ladies and gentlemen, when sin entered the human race, planned obsolescence also entered the human race. And the neat thing about Jesus is he said that where he is, we may be also. Now, obviously, the world and the powers of hell and the lying devils from multi-dimensions that are entering into our dimensions want to make sure you and I go to our great reward, so they basically get the planet. But the point is that God yet has the final say, and God always has a remnant. And Doug, I asked you this, and I know you remember it, but I said, what is a remnant? Well, in a fabric, it's when you've basically sewn whatever you're going to sew. It's the leftover material. And isn't it amazing that the remnant will inherit the robes of righteousness? And the loneliness and I want to share something. I believe outside of apathy and indifference, the other thing that the enemy is using against Christians right now is loneliness. It's amazing with iPads, iPhones, televisions, interactive this, interactive that, games, everything we can watch, do, enjoy. There's still that emptiness. There's still that loneliness. There's still that void that was created by the living God for him to inhabit, and people are trying to fill it with stuff, whether it's sex, drugs, rock and roll, whether it's materialism, whether it's, you name whatever ism, communism. The point being is the quest for power, the quest for eternal life apart from God. Everybody's trying to fill that void with something other than what it was created for. You see, we're like the ultimate we're a multi-dimensional jigsaw puzzle combined of way more than any of us can even understand. We see body, soul, and spirit. We see consciousness. We know all these things. But none of us can even begin to understand what we would have been or could have been or yet shall be when the redemption of the blood of the Lamb, the Lord Jesus Christ, recreates us anew. We're new creations. So the point is, it's tough when you're acting like an old creation or feeling like the knees are crying out to you, you're an old creation, to say, I know there are better days. But my prayer for everyone listening tonight, and this is what I continually pray, Lord, you said when you lead us into the wilderness, and make no doubt about it, You're either going to move to the wilderness or you'll be led there at some point when everything fails, and that's when your money fails, and that's why V has spent so many hours on talk radio telling you, and somebody says, well, I can still go down to the grocery store and take my $10, $20 Federal Reserve note and buy food. Well, you can, but there are others who can't. And the day will come by design when you will be forced to either kiss the devil's bottom and go through, the denial of the living God to be fed at the pig trough. Because, ladies and gentlemen, make no bones about it, even the highest-ranking Luciferians have their hopes dashed and their how should I say this, bleak encounter with reality. I don't know if you ever saw V, Doug, or Joe, but I saw a picture of Angela Merkel and a bunch of people dressed in black robes with some kind of strange symbol on it, and they were bidding departure to one of their high-ranking members of whatever they were involved in. It was obviously dark. They were obviously wearing black robes with a sash on the top that gathered the robe together. I don't know if any of you ever saw that photo, but immediately I looked at their faces, and I knew that they knew that guy had gone to the very powers that they had yielded themselves to. In other words, they knew there's a certain fate that awaits them. Did you ever see that picture, V?
Steve, I'll tell you, I've never seen it, and I'm not sure what happened to V. I know he's having technical issues. Okay. V, are you there, my friend?
Is he there, V?
He just dropped off.
Yeah, he's having technical issues.
Well, I got it. But, Doug, here's the thing.
You're right, Steve.
Well, you see, it's not enough to be right, and again, everybody wants to make sure. I got to share this with everybody. This is funny. I had a guy write me a letter and tell me what his brother thought of me. Okay, now I'm not beating up on my critics. God knows that they're like ants; they're always around. But the point is that he said, "Yeah, I looked at."
I'm back on.
Okay, I just want to finish. I'll give it to you. He looked at my prophecy and he said, well, yeah, that guy's been saying the same thing for 20 years. And I said, Doug, today, I said, yeah, they'd have a real problem with the Revelation now. I once said, when the tribulation starts, I said, mark my words. I said this 23 years ago. Most people will deny they're in it, even those who have been preaching it. Go ahead, V.
The whole thing is this. Time is everything, and we are giving you folks information, data before anybody else can get to you. We're giving you the information that nobody else, that you won't be able to get anywhere else. So you got to, like what Steve always says, you got to take it to the Lord in prayer, and that's important. It's so critical that we all develop a spirit of discernment in these last days. Because discernment is something that's so very, very key and very vital, okay? There is so much deception happening. And oftentimes when I talk with Steve, we always talk about the multiple levels of deception that occur. Just when you think you found truth at one level, there's another lie on top of that completely shakes your paradigm. And, folks, it's important that you really begin to get yourself familiarized with the Lord and with a relationship with Christ, because that's the only thing that will sustain you. Okay, the current flow, the current situation that we're facing as a nation. I mean, look at it, folks. There's no peace. There's no sort of anchor anymore, and it feels like that we've been in free fall. It feels as if all sorts of normalcy is gone. And these are all signs, folks, of an impending disaster. Okay? I mean, think about it. Oftentimes I talked about the frequency of events. And I said, we went from a news cycle. When I first came on board 19 months ago, there was a news cycle where you would have an event occur, maybe a major event, maybe once a year, and then the once-a-year event became every 6 to 8 months. Excuse me. And then every 6 to 8 months turns out to be every month, and then every month turns out to be every week. We're at the point now, folks, where things are happening every day. So the frequency is building up. Everywhere you look, It is a powder keg. It is a pressure cooker. Everything's looking to explode into some sort of a crescendo. And that's the thing, folks, is something that you cannot ignore. You can't do the whole entire ostrich situation where you can just bury your head in the sand and pretend that it's not there. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, look at what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri. That whole town is not only being a beta test for martial law, but it is spiraling out of control. There were thousands of people protesting right here in New York City because of what's going on in Ferguson. And there are populations of people that are being whipped into a fervor. And again, it's more chaos. It's more disorder. It's more pressure. So everywhere you look, the only thing that I see are powder kegs. I see powder kegs in the stock market, powder kegs in the bond market, powder kegs in the real estate market, in the consumer debt. I see powder kegs in the nation's debt, in the whole economic situation globally, militarily, even amongst the population. Everywhere you look is a point of attention. Folks, this is not a time to turn away. This is the time to engage these things, to reconcile your mind with these things. Get it into your heart, but do not operate in fear. Understand what is facing you and make the appropriate actions so that you and your family can escape these things that are about to come. And that's the whole focus here, folks. You know, look at the joke of a silver fix, and just to let the audience know, I will be sitting in as soon as I get off this call at 11:30 at night. I will be on a call with London, and it's going to be 6 or 7 in the morning over there, and we're actually going to be talking about the silver fix. There's a huge meeting that's occurring with some movers and shakers that I'm, been invited to sit on. Because the electronic silver fix that they've put in is going to be very interesting. It's going to be, just as W talked about, and just as I detailed as well, the silver bullet to the dollar. It's going to be the setting up of the exit doors. It's going to be the system that's going to ensure the death of the United States economy. And you're going to see more of this. Some people say, well, what about gold and silver? The price is getting beat down. Folks, let me tell you something. The same banksters, the same fraudsters who lie to you with an imaginary 17,000-point Dow, a stock market that has no volume, in an economy with no liquidity, lies to you about 17,000 points, and most of you know, most of this listening audience understands that number is fraudulent. Why is it that some of you have a problem understanding that the spot price of gold and silver is also fraudulent?
Amen.
That it's suppressed. You can't hold. This is what Orwell talked about: double thinking, okay, or double think, holding two opposing realities at the same time, but being at peace with both. You say that you're worried about a police state, but you live in, let's just say, New York City, Manhattan, when there's thousands of cameras, and you don't mind going to the TSA and being patted down, and you think it's just business as usual. You listen to radio programs such as this, and you listen to the warnings that have been put out, and to you take it. But at the other side, you don't do nothing about it. You're still going about your life as if nothing's wrong. That's double think. And if you are suffering from that, guess what? You're a mind control victim. And not because somebody kidnapped you when you were a small child and induced trauma-based training upon you to warp your thinking. No. You're mind controlled because you sit in front of the TV too long. You're too inured with the systems of this world. You're too familiar with the status quo, with the modus operandi of the operation in this bread and circus. And that's what you need to break away from. Folks, you do not need these fraudsters telling you what reality is. Shut them off. When I see something which I know, like silver, is worth $500 right now, that's the true value of silver per ounce if you adjust it for inflation. $500 per ounce. Do you think I care if it's at $19? I'm still buying. If it's at $30, I'm still buying. If it's at $200 tomorrow, I'm still buying. If they drop it down to $18, I'm still buying. It doesn't matter because I understand. See, the same fraudsters who want you to believe in supply and demand all of a sudden do not want you to apply those very same rules of supply and demand to the very thing, which is gold and silver, that is kryptonite to the banksters. So they have you believe in their hocus pocus. They have you believe in their imaginarium, their circus, and all the illusion that these magicians do. And you believe it. You believe that the unemployment rate is 6.7%. You believe that XYZ company had a $2 billion corporate earnings profit. All the superficial things that are based on fluff. You are sold to the phantom growth that is in this economy. And you think that it has some sort of merit or bearing, as it is the very thing that determines your reality and existence. And if you're that person, folks, you need to unplug because you are under some sort of programming. That's why guys like Steve get on the radio, and Doug, and Cho, and myself, and Hawk, and Evenson, and W, and all these guys. That's why we get on the radio. Guys like John B. Wells. And we pound the microphone because we're your dose. We're your dose of reality. We're the antibiotic to the disinfo. And when you tune into us, we are the anchor that roots you in reality. And we are the very voices that God has put in your life to make sense of this insane world. And now we're not infallible. We make mistakes because we are dealing in the world where the best laid plans of mice and men often go astray, often go wrong. And when you're dealing in a world where three-dimensional chess, and we bring information from the highest levels, that's what you need to listen to. That's what you need to pray about. That's what you need to be an impetus and an anchor and a compass for you to make the right decisions. That's what this whole thing is about, folks. Steve.
By the way, that was very well said, B. I'm sorry, Steve. I didn't mean to jump in there, but that was extremely well said.
No, you jump in, Doug, because, I cannot say, go ahead.
No, you know what? I got an email today. Somebody saying that my goodness, silver could go down to as little as $9 an ounce, and this was copied from some columnist writing this, and I'm thinking, I looked at this and I just wondered what reality that individual was really adhering to, and V, you so eloquently defined this this reality or lack of reality, and I want to thank you for that. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, the way V spelled it out is absolutely true. You can't, here's the deal. When people look at a political solution to a spiritual problem, they re-vote the same people in who couldn't fix the problem to begin with. That's the definition of insanity. It's also, I would say, the outworking of basically laziness. V was talking about antibiotics. I think basically what we're trying to do here is be an anti-myopic, because most people are myopic. They can only see immediately what's in front of them. That's why, basically, Jesus made it simple. The most religious people in the world who were expecting the Messiah couldn't see him when he stood before them. And I say this to all of those who cannot even speak the name of Jesus because you're listening to lies. The point being is that which of the prophets did your fathers not kill? Going back to the statement. See, Doug, here's the hardest thing. We're all not only creatures of habit, we all have our normalcy bias. We all have our basically ups and downs. We have our worldview. I deal with people every day, and it's to my frustration, who basically tell me I'm negative and they're just going to deal with one day at a time. Well, everybody who was slaughtered with the Yazidis, and also everybody in those Nigerian pastors. I don't know if you watched that, Doug, and I don't know if you saw it, V, but they just laid there as Boko Haram slit their throats. There were I think if I remember right, I could only see 4 or 5, maybe they're guys with guns, but not one of them made a move to try and change their situation. They were like sheep led to the slaughter. And I'm telling you point blank, I'm wrestling with that, ladies and gentlemen, saying to the Lord, Lord, I understand your kingdom is not of this world, yet would you have your disciples fought. That was the first time when you came as the Lamb of God to take away the sin of the world. But Lord, Peter had a sword. And you know what, Doug? I come to the conclusion now after 43 years of walking and stumbling and falling and the Lord lifting me up, that God's people would rather not do anything than trust him in faith to do something. I'm sorry, but that's the conclusion I've come to. Now, there are exceptions to that, okay, but I'm talking in general. It's kind of like, well, if I don't say anything against the evil, I'll live longer. My favorite was, and you know you've heard me say this, but my favorite email slam over the years is, how could you possibly be telling the truth? If you were telling the truth, you'd be dead. And my answer to that is, of course I'd be dead. Unfortunately for you is that people are praying for me, and God is sovereignly keeping me alive. And the point being is that if that's their only definition of truth, then they're really sad. What they're saying is, I can't wait for you to die, Stephen, shut up. Then I don't have to deal with hearing all your nonsense. But then why do you listen? You know, it's an amazing thing, Doug. Here's the deal. I believe the people that listen to Hagmann and Hagmann or whatever show is talking about the reality of what's going on. They have a voice screaming inside them. I want to know the truth. And I tell people the best antidote for fear is being warned ahead of time. And, you know, V, when I think back of what you were talking about when the bankers started getting whacked, and by the way, most people don't know this, but it was Lehman Brothers that transferred the majority of high technology through their business dealings to the Chinese early on. Lehman's did it. And what happened to them, V? Well, I'll fill it in for people. They went out of business. So, ladies and gentlemen, please understand, the pleadings that you hear, and pleadings is true, the evidence you hear, the information you hear, it will all stop someday. And then what you're going to be left with is simply this. You'll either be left with your criticism, you'll be left with your knowledge, you'll be left with the scripture, you'll be left with hope, you'll be left with faith, and that's what I'm praying. And the day is soon arising when Jesus said the night comes when no man can work. Doug, I am tired. I am worn out. So he said, well, that's a negative confession. Stand in my shoes for 23 years before you give me a pat on the back. And again, I'm not trying to be negative, but what I'm trying to do is I say, God, will you please baptize our listeners in reality? Again, I threatened I won't do it, but simply because I don't have the time. But if I were to post the email Quarks of the Day, Q-U-A-R-K, okay? If I were to give people a vision into what I call quantum moronics, okay, there you go, Doug, another one, quantum moronics, that it escapes even this dimension, how some of the statements can be made, what people would see, and I tell people this, most criticism is coming from being afraid, coming from people that say, I hope V's not right, yet he's been right. I hope Steve's not right about Ebola. Yes, I'll be right. Someone says, is it important for you to be right? I said, no, it breaks my heart because I've already seen the outcome. Well, you couldn't have seen the outcome unless God showed you. Guess what he did 43 years ago? And see, the thing is that Jeremiah's eyes were a fountain of tears. They were always a fountain of tears. And because he couldn't understand how the people of God couldn't see what was happening before them while it was happening to them. Does that make sense, Doug? The people of God could not see what was happening before their eyes, even as it was happening to them. So the point is that that's how powerful a force of denial is, and that's what we're trying to fight against. Because, look, again, we're just about out of time. And that's why, somebody said, what would you like people to take away from everything you've done? And my answer is simply this. I would like them to take away, in other words, end up with the fact that God has always been telling us the truth, though the Satanists and the globalists and the Luciferians and the liars and the devils and the demons of hell have all tried to obscure the truth in order that they might take the facts of historic truth and use them to basically lure people to their eternal damnation. I'd like to think this, that God, though he didn't give us total revelation, has given us so much revelation, and as King David said, it's within the heart of a king to search out the matter. I'm praying tonight, Doug, that people will start to see that the day will come when there will be no more V. I don't mean because he's gone to an early death or anything. I just mean because this sort of broadcast will not be allowed. I pray for the day that people will learn the lessons that Pastor Langford has taught them about praying and fasting, about sticking to the Word of God when all the public opinion. I used to have a statement, and it's real simple. If you listen to what the public wants, all you'll end up is basically abandoned like King Saul to meet your fate on a battlefield that normally you would have had the victory that'll result in your death. It's never doing what the people want you to do. It's always doing what God tells you to do. And when men listen to God and when women listen to God and obey him, guess what? The people are blessed. When people listen to people and try and, quote, be friends with the world, it ends in damnation, heartbreak, and destruction. Damnation, heartbreak, and destruction. And that is what lies ahead unless one has the power of the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ working in their lives through the Holy Spirit. And Doug, I'm done. My voice is shot, and I know when I got to quit. So blessings to everyone. I thank the Lord for V. I thank the Lord for you, Doug. Joe, blessings to you. I thank the intercessors for Romy. God bless you. Beata, bless you. Manette, God bless you. The heart of Manette for the men that she ministers to. I've never met such a heart in all my life. For those of you who are prayer warriors and intercessors, keep it up, because that's the only reason we can. And pray that the eyes of the understanding of the people that listen, pray that the hearts of the fearful will be turned into stainless steel, and that the men and women of God will arise for this time in history, unlike any time that's ever been or will be after this. Good night, Doug.
Good night, Steve. Thank you, my brother. Well, V, I'll tell you, you've got a conference call after the show. What do you expect from this, if I can ask? If I was a fly on the wall, or we were flies on the wall, what's coming?
Well, that's a good question. There's a lot of questions that I have in regards to the conference call. And a lot of it centers around the electronic silver price fix that's been announced, that's already at work, in which a small pittance of silver was settled. And I think what it will really surround itself on is how they're going to have the type of volume that the old silver fix had. So I guess tonight's meeting is pretty much going to be about positioning the new silver fix and its role for the settlement of all the contracts that are still kind of out there. They haven't completely gotten a hold of it yet. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see what their strategy is going to be. And, as soon as I find out, I'll definitely dispense that and disseminate that information to the rest of you guys.
Cool, thank you. And remind folks, take this opportunity to remind folks of your radio endeavor. You know, you're on weekly now, every Sunday, correct?
Yep, every Sunday from 6 to 8. You guys can join me over at Freedom Slips Radio. The Guerrilla Economist radio program is on from 6 to 8 every Sunday. And again, there's the website, roguemoney.net, subscription site, $2.99 a month for the front row seat. And if anybody's got any questions or anything, you can always contact me at Guerrilla Economist. One word, that's Guerrilla, Guerrilla Economist at Gmail. And that's about it, Doug.
I got to tell you, I just you were very eloquent tonight. I want to thank you so much for your time, and I know your time is very valuable, and your insight is indispensable. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, V.
Good night, guys. Take care.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Well, I'll tell you, folks, that was a great program. Steve Quayle gave it his all in stevequayle.com, and V as well, roguemoney.net, 2 sites to visit, bookmark. I just thank God for both gentlemen, both men of God.
Absolutely.
Man, I'll tell you.
Lots of time and effort and thought, and we thank V for his time and Steve for his time and insight. And, we just got to keep paying attention and keep our head up and stay in prayer and stay in the Word and keep looking forward.
Absolutely. And don't forget, folks, Hagmann and Hagmann.com. That's Hagmann and Hagmann.com. That's where we're putting all of our show prep or show information, show prep. And that's going to be our central hub, Hagmann and Hagmann.com. Please bookmark that. But still frequent, HomelandSecurityUS.com for other information as well. God bless you all. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight.
We'll be back tomorrow with Stan Dale. Have a great night. Stay safe and God bless.